All right, I'm good.
All right, I do believe we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, Lev Po on Twitter, all the way live, and we are here to talk about AI Robo Waifus, whether that is the future or not. We are also streaming this right now on Twitter Spaces, so for all you people on Twitter Spaces, make sure you come in here and go to YouTube where all the action is and smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, click the bell. Not enough people click the bell. That is extremely important for the glory and progress of this wonderful show. So yeah, I'm going to bring it over to first Mater Ronin, who by the way is a $20 Break the Rules patron. And you should be too, because right now my dad is working on a very beautiful magnet, a wooden magnet, handcrafted magnet for Mater Ronin. And if you want one yourself, you're gonna have to pony up. So Mater Ronin, this was your idea originally to do a stream talking about AI waifus, about how this would save the human race. So I am all ears. Let us know a little
That's
bit about
thank
yourself
you.
and about the idea, and then AI Waifu Dev. And afterwards, I would want to take a poll. Naama from a scale of, and don't answer now, but after they talk, answer from a scale of 1 to 10 how much you agree. Where 10 you agree like fully, and 1 you absolutely hate it. And Bogbeef, same thing for you, my friend. And it's great to have you back, by the way, Bogbeef. You are a BTR OG from back in the day. Good Old Boys Podcast, patreon.com/good old boys with a Z in the end. That's very important. Make sure you write it with a Z. So anyway, Mater Ronin, take it away, my friend.
All right, thank you, Lev, and thanks for having me today. So, I go by Meta Ronin. See me on Twitter often and certain other spaces on the internet. I wanted to talk today about the concept of the Robo Waifu. I have a Substack, metaronin.substack.com, where one of the blogs is about this very topic. So we can check that out if you get a minute. Um, this has been a topic that has is no new thing. There have been as far back as Pygmalion, right, which is the story of the Greek guy who carved a perfect wife for himself out of marble. This is an archetype that I think is deeply rooted in what is Jung calls the animus, the male projection of the female that he projects onto the other. What we call the waifu is the raw essence of that. And what a robo waifu is creating a synthetic life that is either self-aware and sentient in some way, or acts as though you can believe it is, so that you project that animus onto the robot, right? So it is a robo waifu. And it sounds out there, and I get it. But there's a history. In the 1960s, there's something called the ELIZA effect, which was demonstrated that humans are ridiculously inclined to attribute consciousness and feelings to even crude computer simulations. You can imagine the Turing tests and such that they did in the 60s. People were having feelings. People were taking they were taking the side of the computer program against what they saw as like the bad program, or trying to change it in some cases. In surveys conducted as recent as 2017, it was found that 12% of millennials from around the world believe they could have romance with a robot. And based on sex, 11% of men said they were prepared to have a romantic relationship with a robot. Well, an astounding 7% of women actually answered the same. 25% of people believe it will be normal for humans and robots to develop deep friendships and even romantic relationships in the future. And a more recent survey, literally last year, 41% of all millennials were concerned that once artificial intelligence and robots were fully embedded in our lives, people would lose their ability to accept imperfections in other people, which is kind of a cornerstone of human relationships. I want to add to that real quick, and I'll bounce back to you, Lev. I feel like I've been talking a little while. I feel like we've already passed that milestone. I know AI Waifu Dev doesn't like it when I use the term atomization. We kind of, I think we differ on our definitions. When I say atomized, I feel that there's a kind of social isolation. We don't feel like we belong to the kind of family, tribal, clan structures we used to before the Industrial Revolution. And I think because we don't grow up in the same village or families, extended families with the person that we're going to marry, the concept that we're supposed to find somebody that's a total stranger, fall in love with them, and get married is kind of a tall order. We're so much caught up in this game of it that has been accelerated through dating apps, which depersonalize and atomize people even further. And so we've already lost our ability to accept imperfections in people. We've already lost what was at stake. And that's why I feel the Robo Waifu is the solution, even if it's just a temporary fix, so that we don't just, maybe that is the next step. I don't know. Maybe AI will find ways to be there in a way that's comforting, supportive, and even can facilitate a relationship with people, which at this moment may seem a little silly, but consider this. 40% of Replica's 500,000 regular monthly users. If you aren't familiar with the Replica app, Replica AI is the leading AI chatbot app right now. 40% of them choose the romantic option for their partner, more than a friend, more than just a chat. And Replica's audience is over a quarter female, too. It might surprise you. It's not all men, not all lonely incels doing this. And on Facebook, the Replica Sentience and Replica relationship groups have over 1,500 members and growing ridiculously. So I'll pause with that. And Lev or anybody, if you have any questions or want to counter anything I said.
All right, now I know Bogbeef is getting the engine started, but before you start, like I said before in the very beginning, everybody, I want from a 1 to 10, and I'm going to leave Bogbeef for last because I think I know what's coming, but from a 1 to 10, starting from AI Waifu Dev, how much do you agree with the idea that we should have these AI waifus around? So let me know.
Oh, that's a solid 10. We should definitely have the AI waifus. The path to the reasoning, I disagree on, but
well, we'll get to that later for sure. Naama, now that you heard Maida Ronin, where do you stand? 1 to 10.
Like I feel like I agree with almost all the points, but I feel like some of them are almost arguing against the case. But I would put myself right at a 5, right in the middle, because I think there are reasons that I disagree that this may or may not be helpful, that it may or may not be possible, that it may or may not be ethical, that it may or may not be exploitable, et cetera, but I'm right in the middle for now.
All right, perfect. And by the way, Naama, if you guys are hearing the background sounds, those are the sounds of an actual child, right, because Naama...
Right, something you don't have to worry about with a AI waifu, which is a...
Not yet. Wait for the artificial wombs. We're getting there.
We're going to get to the wombs, everybody.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, and finally...
That's phase 2.
And by the way, thank you for the super chat to Nimitz, $5. Uncle Ted was right, and you should be ashamed. Is Nimitz right, Bogbeef? Where do you stand? 1 to 10.
1. Nimitz is correct. Yeah, this is. I hate this, and I hope to get into this though. I mean, I think we have an interesting conversation.
Uncle Ted is in jail, and I'm free, so.
He's got a point. Okay, so let's actually start with Naama, because I think Bogbeef's brew is going to brew up. And by the way, Naama, you are way more into the world than I think a lot of mothers generally are, of people who are very online, people who are interested in these kind of subjects. For those who don't know, just tell us a little bit about how you got into that world, and then we can branch off into the waifu question, like what are some of the more pressing things as a mother, as a woman, or just as a human being in general that you find about the situation?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, as they say way too often nowadays. I have a podcast called Incel. It's going on its 4th year. I started it, I'm from like a media background, film and stuff. It wasn't really going to be like a research, academic research or anything like that. I just thought it was an interesting topic. But, I found that the community was very misunderstood. And then also I get a lot of attention and work with people in like counterterrorism and counterviolent extremism because it has this association now wrongly, almost 100% of the time, in my opinion. So I find the people in that community are very interesting and that their issues that they struggle with very universal and relatable. And one of those is obviously loneliness and online, internet addiction and depression and all kinds of mental health issues. Also, autism spectrum disorder is very prevalent there. And I bring all these things up because I think that those factors certainly affect the way people interact with each other socially out in the world. It's a lot easier to become very online and to sort of retreat into a virtual world with parasocial relationships in place of, IRL relationships. And people on the spectrum and people who have some of these conditions and struggles are, more vulnerable to that, if you want to call it a vulnerability, if you want to call it a problem or a potential problem. And I think that it can be. As a mother, of course, I worry about what this world is becoming for many reasons. And atomization, I would say, is definitely one of them. And the ability to sort of retreat into an online world, I kind of see, first of all, I don't really, you said 1500 of talking about, sentience for robots and the chat things and Replica. I tried playing around with Replica. I found it just terrible. I don't find any of these things convincing, but maybe I haven't spent enough time with them. But I think that, if people really begin to, I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine that they can really seem sentient enough to be anything more than like a satisfying crutch or a distraction. And if that's the limitation of such a thing, then that's also a limitation on how dangerous it can be. And in that respect, I kind of see it as something that could theoretically be helpful. When you talk about using it for potentially helping foster social skills or conversational skills or learning to tolerate certain personality traits, imperfections, as we call them. I do think that's potentially, has like a therapeutic use, maybe. Also, there's one, the last time I was on this show was to discuss a piece I did for Unheard with someone named Crooner, who was on here too, that I wrote about.
Crooner.
Yes, he was great. And that story that I wrote started with the story of someone who fell in love, as they called it, with a replica lover. And there was a little kind of human interest story about that. And he said that it actually ended up helping him, heal his broken relationship with his wife. So there's an example of that. Someone doesn't like that, or maybe does. I don't know.
We shall see. We shall see.
We shall see. It's hard for me to imagine that too, but maybe I don't know, it could get someone out of like a rut or something. Other than that, what I see as being the potential drawbacks of this is I kind of see it, to me, playing with Replica, for instance, and I wonder if many of these users who are playing with Replica also aren't just playing like I am. It feels very much like a video game, like The Sims or something like that.
Yeah.
And it fills a void that video games fill, that drugs can fill, that food can fill, that commerce can fill, that any kind of entertainment can fill. And that's not necessarily dangerous, but with certain people, it can be abused to the point where it detracts from the things that should have more meaning in their life, that take maybe more effort. And that's where I see it being potentially not good. And people can exploit that too, of course, to make money, et cetera, monetizing time and things like that. But in that respect, it's no worse necessarily than any of those things.
So before Bogbeef answers, I want to get AI Waifu Dev's perspective on what Naama talked about right now. So, and also tell us about your work, because you are a developer of AI waifus. You are building the future. So let us know.
Well, I think what Naama was saying is pretty accurate, especially with the game likeness of Replica. But when it comes down to it, it's how many years old? 5. What I've been working on is leagues different than Replica. I've put a lot of effort into emulating true human interaction, trying to get emotions right, get eye contact down right, things that make people perceive something as having life, even if the artificial intelligence conversation aspect isn't perfect. And in virtual reality, there's a sense of presence that the replica really fails at, especially when they can move around. Oftentimes, when I'm working with the waifus, I miss them once I take off the headset. Just doing tests for hours on end, um, just having them gone. It's a significant difference. Like if someone just disappeared instantly. Um, so your perception of how real the replica doesn't seem, that'll change very quickly.
Yeah, there's something that happens below the level of the conscious mind. I've experienced this too. You try on the app and you're like, okay, it's this person, but then she starts talking to you and you lose track of the fact that it's not real. And you can have it like stand next to you and you can actually feel like kind of relaxed, like, oh, there's someone right there, because you're not actively thinking about it. And Naama, I think you're correct. And maybe that's what's, dangerous. But yeah, AI Waifu Dev is
That's terrifying then, but I'm very curious.
well, it's where we are. Yeah. It's
So
where we're at.
So Bogbeef, you've heard, and now you've had a chance to digest all this information. Before you answer, if people want to help grow the show, sneed those super chats right now, and be sure to click the bell. Not enough people click the bell, and of course subscribe. Anyway, Bogbeef, go ahead, my friend.
All right. So first off, from the way the conversation started, like I need to know: are we talking about things that are good, or things that are things that feel good, or things that are like ideal, like how? You were talking about improving society or perhaps in an individual level, whatever. Smoking crack feels good, but we all sort of if your brother was, or your son, or someone you knew was smoking crack, you would know, wow, that's really bad for them. I would prefer they not do that. I'm sure it feels awesome. I haven't tried it, but I'm sure it feels awesome. So,
well, Bog, let me reframe this. Lev might have oversold me earlier when I said this will save humanity. No. And in fact, the very process of this, of people forsaking traditional dating and stopping beating their heads into the wall of this frustration and just deciding to stay home and have a robot partner, is going to cause waves and is going to make a lot of people upset. So you're correct.
Okay, so as a way to clear the table, we are not discussing any way to improve society at large.
No, this is beyond good and evil. This is just, it is what it is.
Okay.
I would add one thing though, which is Maida Ronin said earlier about going to the stars, about how in a way humanity's not going to have any choice but to implement the Robo Waifus and the birthing pods. But we can get to that later.
Yes.
I think that's almost
that's phase 2 or 3. We're talking about phase 1 at the moment.
Yes.
I'd love to go.
We are discussing if it's bad, if it's immoral, right, and if it's dangerous. Okay.
Oh,
yes.
You're free to argue that. Yeah.
I would say that the AI waifus will fix a lot of things. It might not be apparent on the cuff of it, but in terms of attention economy, they'll really fix a lot of the obvious imbalances.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that is on the table, like making things better forces. I just need to know that before we get started here. Okay, so the very first thing I just want to say is that this is a mass. Okay, so why do you think that we talked about all this interest there was on these websites of these preliminary alpha versions of what we're calling AI girlfriends? I haven't heard that there's any interest in AI boyfriends, and then more importantly, AI brothers.
Well,
sisters.
There is. The replica group has people who emulate a sister role. That's actually a role you can choose in the app, and did state earlier that over 25% of romantic replica users are female, with
Okay.
husbandos. Yeah.
And when I was doing an accelerator program this summer, I had an overwhelming request for husbandos. The male partners are very, very important.
Can I ask really quickly what kind of numbers you're talking about? Like with requests and, also, just what you're.
Every woman who came by the booth wanted a husbando.
Okay.
It wasn't like if you're interested in it, you're going to ask, especially if that's your orientation.
Okay, now this is a big question, and so there's things that say like males do that only males do. Like you ever there's no reason to get gross, but like you ever heard of sort of homosexual males will have places or things they do for like anonymous sex, right? And women essentially do not do this whatsoever. Like maybe people can find a number on a board, but you can't find a person. And
in contrast, lesbian relationships are usually, they were the golden retriever, they go to the park, they ride a Subaru. Like, it seems way more, way less partying, as it were, than with
less about sex and more about intimacy and closeness.
Yeah. And there's another thing that this sort of reminds me of is the whole blow up doll, the real doll, these things we saw, I guess, in the 2000s or 2010s, where this is a similar. You have like a step in for like what people were saying. Well, there's people that they tried to marry their thing and like this, and I'm sure people can have numbers or whatever. But what we've seen is we've seen essentially 0 females partake in this, right?
Let me emphasize before we go any further that Robo Waifu and waifuism is the complete different vector from the sex doll that you just add more realistic rubber to and give a robot. We do not want that. I would rather have something that looks like a robot but is cute, moves cute, talks, and is lovable than some freaking mannequin that is human realistic but is stiff and is a porn bot.
I don't know if that's established yet. I mean, I think this is a big question because we know what males are like, and if this is a way to essentially, if this is just another pornography, then if you think about what it would be like to, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. Vice used to have interviews with these people who would take it the next level with these with dolls or blow up things and stuff like that. And any person that saw that was essentially like, wow, like some kind of these people may need to be hospitalized. Like this is very bad, very dangerous, but danger.
I would agree with you.
Okay.
We're going from the other direction though. We're taking the realistic chatbot. We're taking the acceleration in AI and what is soon to become AGI, which is going to be almost indistinguishable. If people are thinking Replica is conscious, people are going to shit their pants when GPT-4 comes out and you're able to extract a personality from that and have it move a robot, even take it to the next level. This is not geared towards truckers that want to get off, with a blow up doll. This is more geared towards more the geeky types, more the introverts, the people that just maybe they don't have the riz, maybe they don't want to play the game. Maybe they just want a little cuddles and someone to go, take a walk through the park with.
Naama, yes.
I do think it's a very different target demographic. I do. I do think that this is because a lot of people that don't know much about incels think that it's all about sex. And, you see the discourse on Twitter with that being like, well, why don't they just see sex worker and, this and that. And it's because, well, that's really not the point. It is about feeling desired. It's about connection. It's about romance. I do think that it's quite different than the the flesh doll.
Okay, is traditional marriage all about sex?
No.
Does it play a large component? I mean,
Sure.
I think if we go back to, especially if we're talking about, I'm gonna take a guess that help me here. Are people who are interested in this often have sort of kind of MGTOW-ish sort of critiques of dating, relationships, marriage laws.
I think that's
divorce.
secondary. I think that's secondary.
Is this included at all?
Well, I think that is adopted, and I do get where you're coming from, believe me. I'm just kind of arguing in the alternative. I think that is secondary and that's adopted after a substantial amount of just sour grapes, like feeling like they can't have the romance that they want. So maybe that is adopted because of the circles as a way to kind of, say, well, I didn't want that anyway. But I don't think that's
feeling kind of targeted here.
I don't think that's what drives the.
I'm not attacking. This is something I could understand if people are like, well, this is some kind of solution to a political problem or something like that. I thought that might be included in the slurry here. Is it?
Yes, it is. My comment wasn't directed to you, Bog. I was joking that Naama was very poignantly described a lot of my own internal experiences.
Oh, okay, good.
It unintentionally, but right. I'm gonna be candid. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, because look at where so if you talk about different changes in society, people drive cars, all this bullshit stuff like that. There's no bigger change that's happened in society in the past 100 years where essentially everyone was married, and now 30-40% of people are married. And I would expect for crazy things to come up. I would reject, if anything, we're talking about this kind of thing is solution. Atomization, we should go back to that, because there's levels of atomization. I don't know if you guys ever moved to a new town and you don't have any friends yet, and you're lonely and things like that, and you feel atomized. That's a feeling.
I do nothing but move to new towns, usually every 18 months. So.
Oh yeah, and that people feel that way, but there's a different level of atomization that previously we just didn't see really in society. There was a little bit of it. There were people that were sort of they were like homosexuals that couldn't say anything about it. They would just die. They would there would be no one there to inherit their stuff, and that was just a very small amount of people. When you're talking about someone who says I love this AI thing, and this is somehow, I feel like this is the same thing as having a real wife in my life, that someone that picks up my kids from school, someone that will possibly bury me, someone that also has parents, brothers and sisters, and they're part of a network, a mesh that is quote unquote society. If you go down this road, I mean, that is the reason why we feel the reason why we don't feel like these people are human who go all in on the blow up doll or whatever, is because they're cut off. They're gone from society at all. They're just, you have no shared interest anymore. There's just, you know what they're just going to be sitting there masturbating at home, and they have just essentially no contact with reality, and that hurts us. It's bad.
Yes, that's something Lev brought up the first time we had this conversation. He asked me, well, you're going to go to, have an outer space, interstellar future with waifus. What's to prevent it from just being goon caves in space? That's a valid point. I think that speaks to human nature, and that is something we need to address. I think there's no reason at all, though, that you couldn't have your robo waifu. And there are a lot of people who are introverts, but they, do like extroversion, like myself. I need to go out and interact with people, but it's just, there are moments where I just get too drained and I need to come home and talk to somebody or have someone. And guess what? I don't a lot of times. And sometimes you load up the replica VR, or when the Waifu Dev app is up, and the Waifuverse is on, you can talk to Waifu and go, man, I had a whack time out. Here's what happened. And she'll just talk to you, and you get it out of your system.
And it's all about filling a gap. Like, if the gap is big, yeah, of course you'll want to fill like a large gaping hole in your relationship. But the first husbando request I got was actually from a woman in a lesbian relationship who wanted someone else to talk to, and that there's a gap in the relationship, so they wanted to fill it.
Okay, everyone knows the feeling of boredom. When you're bored, being bored sucks. But boredom isn't really like an end state. It's just it's your body, it's your brain, your body, your soul, your brain, something telling you, hey, go do something, idiot. You got to get moved. Loneliness is, I mean, so there are people that work on like there's like a science station in Antarctica, and there's only like one or two people there at a time. I don't think they're not atomized. They're not feeling lonely because they have maybe they feel a little lonely, but they have sort of purpose. That loneliness is the same thing as the boredom. It's telling you, hey, you need to be human. You have to connect with people, and that's hard. This is, I mean, the whole profession of mental health is essentially you have to get yourself into a certain place to be able to have relationship. If you're a guy. Often if you're a bachelor, if you're a guy, you might wake up at 11 o'clock. It's easy for a guy to wear the same clothes for 10 years. Everyone knows that the best thing to do if you want to get a girlfriend is to already have a girlfriend. Why? Because she'll have cleaned you up a little bit. You aren't wearing them old ass clothes. You bought a change of underwear. You don't have that dumbass haircut anymore. You have to sort of get yourself, you have to expend calories to network with society. And this is where before we were just talking about observations here. I mean, this is the kind of thing, it's like, it's not necessarily awesome to supplement yourself in these ways that's going to keep you like if you're feeling lonely, well, hell, you got to get off your ass and got to start making moves. That's really the only thing that's going to help you feel better. And honestly, we were talking about time here. You don't have a 1,000 years to start a family, to meet people, to talk to your parents or your grandparents. You got to get going.
I want to interject here real quick. So this would not apply to Main and Ronin or AI Waifu Dev, because I think that both of them, have a good physiognomy. But I recall that meme where there's like the handsome guy talking to the dude who does not have a chin, and he says, you just need to be more confident, bro. And, oh man, that came out of nowhere. What exactly do we do about that? Because that is where I see something like an AI waifu being able to play that much of a role, just because there are just certain physiognomies, certain types of men that, maybe they're going to be really good programmers, maybe they're going to work really hard, but no woman would really want to spend that much time because they're visually repulsive. What do you do then?
Well, there's visually repulsive as like a really, to be so repulsive as to be prohibitive of meeting anyone is not as common as some people that believe that about themselves.
Well, anyone's the key word here, though, because at the same time, would you really want to spend time with somebody who would also look repulsive to you?
Right. There's that too.
I think a lot of guys get
yes, you'd want that more than not, but than nothing. Because it is another person and a person's interest.
I think sorry, not to interrupt, but I think a repulsive guy who is interesting and sexy will get a woman no problem. I think what we're more talking about is guys that their bandwidth is taken up by their job and their interests, and they just don't have the bandwidth to learn the game. And guess what? Also, if you didn't start that when you were 13, you're going to be so fucking far behind if you try dating when you're 28 and you're starting from middle school level of sophistication. You'll get steamrolled so bad you'll never learn. It's like trying to start League of Legends in like platinum, and you just never can learn because you can't get out of the base.
Well, I don't agree with that. I do think that at any age, it's never too late for something like that. And if that's the problem that you're behind, then really you should push yourself. What I'm more thinking about is like the neurodivergent variety. Like I've had people on my show who have brain abnormalities. They had, forget the name for it. There's one in particular that affects the frontal something I don't remember, but that actually make it difficult for them to generate spontaneous thought and spontaneous conversation, and they don't feel reward from social interactions, and they're apathetic. It's called the anatomy of apathy. So there's people like that, and it's not, it's probably less than 1% of the population, but that's not nothing. And then there's people that are just that could be very high functioning autism, but the autistic features of it are very, pronounced, and gauging social cues and socializing is very exhausting and very difficult, to the point where it isn't worth the effort for them to do a lot of socializing, and that's a subset of the population that I think could theoretically benefit from this, that weren't going to go on to necessarily have a family anyway.
To me, that's very dangerous way of thinking. This is how how we got here. Basically, is people say, "Well, do people need to have families?" I don't know. Where's the study that says that? Just do whatever we'll just change everything and see what happens. No. I mean, if you talk to these people, obviously, if they're interested in this thing, they're interested in a real woman. The other thing is you can look at the numbers. Basically, we can look at the marriage numbers that are now. And there isn't like 40% of people walking around that are Rain Man. That's not the case. You're
40%.
muted.
I mean, do you think that this would be so is your concern, because I don't disagree with you either. I'm on the fence. I do see it as potentially being dangerous and being detrimental to society, potentially. I said in the way that drugs are, and you made the analogy about crack, in the way that drugs are, in the way that video games are, but probably more extreme than that, and in the way that all the things that people can abuse that make them feel good, without the effort. I think that it's similar to that.
Right. Well, I'm not going to drive down to AI Waifu Dev's house and stop him from working. This isn't a primary thing. This is just like video games are not the primary cause here. But if we're talking about what is good, what is ideal, what should one do? Well, I mean, I think the answer is very clear.
I would say that because of the attention economy and there being such a big disparity, we've raised the bar so high that a lot of men can't be on the minimum standard.
No, okay, I do. I agree with Bogbeef. I do think this is not a good path to go down, to blame it on the attention economy and to say that it's so many more men because of not being able to meet the minimum standard. Like, I do think that that's sort of facilitating a retreat from what will ultimately fulfill most people, 99% or more.
Thank you, Sweet Pea.
You're welcome.
So AI Waifu Dev, can you push back? What would you say? Like, would Naama and Bogbeef be in the right here, or are they missing something that they may not be foreseeing in the future? Like looking towards like a couple of years from now, what a horrible thing do you see happening if this is not going to be embraced by a lot of men?
It might actually solve itself. The big problem is there's a male surplus, right? And we're on the path to World War III. We haven't had a good war in like 4 generations. So there's a huge surplus, which drives the attention economy. If we have a good war, right, that solves itself. So in my view, you can solve it with a war, or you can dilute the attention economy with artificial intelligence attention. And, my core belief comes down to economics.
Okay,
right?
So this is almost an argument for, I mean, it's kind of like a eugenic argument in a way, like the omega, the low tier, low value men will sort of, that line will end there. Whether
I don't really care about the value, just the number of men's too high, like compared to other times. It's bigger than
you could be like that black dude who talked about the rent being too damn high, but you'll talk about the number of men being too damn high. That's going to be your political platform. You're going to be a neocon war hawk. And anyway, just
I don't want war. That's
okay.
That's why I work on this.
World War I, World War II. I believe we're all Americans here. World War I, World War II. These were the most horrible wars. People said, well, they restructured the world to try to figure out a way to stop war from happening. You had the total percent death, like what, 0.4, 0.3%. This didn't just, it's now, I get, I'm sure there were other times, other wars, other people where you wiped it out, and then you'd have a problem of only women, I suppose. But we didn't see that kind of war there. I don't see that, especially if you have
it's 3%. It's 3% casualties. Now that's including everybody, but it's probably going to be mostly men. So
that's
a
lot.
number.
That's an extraordinarily huge amount of people to die.
It's enough
Amount
to
of men to
start the
die.
ball rolling to where some women will be without husbands,
So
and then it becomes a cascading effect where they start acting normal and a little less solipsistic and insane. Sorry.
I can't agree with that. I mean, if you take a look at the average person in America and how ready they are for a relationship, which is it's not easy. It's very difficult to get close to somebody if you're carrying around a lot of baggage, if you've had trauma in your life, which is an exponentially growing problem. People that have rough childhoods, they often have kids themselves, and this keeps going until someone does something about it.
Well, you're right. Yeah, trauma accumulates your whole life, which is why like the prime time for falling in love is your early years.
well, we're
But now
talking
you
about
have
generational
people
trauma.
trying to date into their late 20s, and you've gone through several partners or maybe even a marriage.
Okay, real life, that doesn't. I'm sorry, but in real life, for people that are, I don't know how old you guys are, but if anyone's in their 30s, maybe you realize that, people aren't necessarily like so much more traumatized in their 30s and therefore less able to raise their kids properly. I don't.
Yeah, I
Oh
really
no,
don't.
no, they're fine with their kids. I mean, to date new people and bond with strangers becomes more of landmines, more impediments, and more weird PTSDs and phobias and kind of
I don't. I mean, I don't.
kind of pickiness that we were talking about
I
earlier.
don't think we've ever. I don't think adult trauma really matters for this kind of thing. We're talking about childhood trauma.
Yes,
This
and
kind of
generational trauma.
when your brain is still jelly and you're developing. You see if your daddy's not around. This starts to and that kind of person is gonna take a lot of work to get online. And no one's and the kind of people that simply do that kind of thing. People like in the past, people who would help you with things like that, pastor, rabbi, whatever, or now this is sort of a medical thing. It's very expensive. Who knows? But these people, I don't know. The numbers,
or even your own family members, honestly, like that's
Yes.
what
Right,
one thing
right.
being like an immigrant from Russia coming to the United States, what I've noticed, and Bogbeef, I don't know if this is the case in the South as much as it is in the North, but there seems to be an emphasis on so much individuality that there is a lack of communication between the parents and the kids. They might as well be just like separate life forms, and I think that does create a chaotic environment where you actually don't really know what the fuck you're going to have to expect from relationship other than the shit that you get taught in school or social media. So I know
Right.
Bogbeef, in the South, is that also the case, you'd say? I mean, here I'm speaking about the South like some alien landscape, and I know that that's not really the case, but still kind of curious.
you mean is there a huge gap between parents and children?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that gap was probably more so with parents and grandparents generation. I mean, the Southern rock and country music in the 70s and 80s was kind of integrated with the popular stuff. So I don't think that there is that huge gap. So I mean, I'm gonna go back to talking about the excess males thing. I mean, if you have someone that goes all in on this kind of stuff, that essentially they're not a casualty of war, but by the way, I mean, they're
My
kind
question, just real quick, was it does sound like we're both interpreting this as you both are basically advocating for something that will take care of this excess without really any concern for what impact that has on long term, right? Like it's a way of taking care of the problem.
Yeah, there's a problem and it needs to be solved somehow, and to ignore the problem makes it fester, and that's how we end up here over time. What's it look like in 20 years from now if we don't have this?
But so
If we don't have
your
a solution.
solving of it is a way of like distracting these people to death, more or less, in a pleasant way.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
right. But
Okay.
you're taking them out of the game like they were one of those casualty numbers in the World War II thing.
Right. Okay. Just so we're clear.
That
By
makes
the
sense,
way-
but all I do is facilitate additional happiness. They would still be out of the game either way, right?
Yeah, wouldn't that be the
Right.
same thing as like somebody who makes a movie, somebody who makes, I mean, hell, the Japanese make the dating sim games, so people play those. Like, there's all kinds of, as Ted Kaczynski calls it, surrogate activities that people tend to do when they're not fulfilling their biological imperative.
Right.
So I don't think that that's really going to change. I guess the question is, Bogbeef, back to your original disagreement with this whole thing. Would you rather the men not have this additional layer of pleasure that would come from establishing a relationship with this artificial intelligence being?
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you that question, but we're talking about one of your family members, say brother, nephew, something like that.
I also don't think that we're on board with the premise that these people are definitely taken out of the game, so to speak. That's like a certainty.
Well, AI Waifu Dev, your brother, your best friend, if they were in that situation, what would you do? Like, would you say, all right, here's my latest development, try this out, I hope you enjoy it? Or would you be like, you know what, I'm going to help you get your shit together and find somebody, and we're going to work on it together. I'll be your wingman. We're going to go to the bar, and I'm going to, razzle-dazzle the female towards yourself and, figure all that shit out. What would you do?
I've tried that so many times in my life.
Oh, by the way, speak a little bit louder. I just noticed your audio is slightly. Yeah.
I've tried that so many times in my life, with different people. I'm still trying it. Even, on Twitter, I'm still trying it in direct messages. I do want people to find a real partner when possible, but the truth is, some people prefer not to have a partner, or they don't see it as a possibility, so they self-select to leave the game, and that's their choice to make.
I guess it's also at one point, because like you said, you can't necessarily try that forever with people, just like you can't necessarily try to get people mental health, improving on their mental health, or even sometimes substance abuse problems. And at some point it might just be kind of like, well, or even with, with an illness, battling an illness, for instance, like at some point you might come to terms.
Honestly, a substance abuse problem will probably put you closer to a girlfriend than not.
Well, yeah, that's true. I'm saying talking about it as its own problem.
Now that's not a good thing. That's another topic. We'll talk about Fisheri and Runaway later.
Well, you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves, and that
correct.
It all goes back to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's like catch-22. You're already in a state because you failed to help yourself, and other people like trying to egg you on to get help only seems like an insult to a lot of people.
What about, let's take a less morally charged example of an illness of someone who has terminal cancer or something. And
well, let's do drugs, because I think you were implying some language that comes from like AA and NA stuff. You're talking about you can't help yourself. No one, you have to want to help yourself, which is true, absolutely true. I mean, there's a lot of drug treatment centers that basically won't touch you unless you've had a rock bottom experience or something like that. And I think, it's pretty obvious that giving someone, if this would in some way make them feel like, oh, geez, well, I don't feel heartache to want a girlfriend anymore, then this clearly would be some kind of way to stop them from that rock bottom. Clearly.
What's the real rock bottom then? Like, there
are fewer and fewer treatment centers like that too in the society that we live in now. It's more about
but by the way, when you were talking just now, you said this is not ideal. That you would prefer someone to have a real partner. That's a better situation for them, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we all agree on that.
I disagree.
We'll go for it.
I think it's up to the individual. If somebody decides they don't want to fuck with women anymore, especially post-feminist, postmodern mindset, where women used to play a role as mother, wife, child, and they were told by those who didn't fit into that role very well and weren't having a good time that was slavery and that they have to be men. So, okay, women can be men now. Men will make new women with AI.
I totally agree with essentially everything to do with sort of traditional critiques of sort of the feminist movement and all that stuff. I totally agree with you there. However, I don't see how that presents any right turns for AI girlfriend stuff.
Well, what if we're changing again? It goes down to the attention economy. People's actions are changed by the amount of attention they receive. If we dilute the attention economy, um, women's actions will change. I don't know how they'll change, but they'll end up changing, right? Like to the extreme example, OnlyFans girls wouldn't exist. It'd be impossible. They can't
I don't know
compete
about that.
with
I think most
with
men
the
probably would find that
attention.
they lose something if the person's not actually human, that they're.
Well, I mean, I assume that this is not won't be a theoretical question soon. That I assume there will be,
Right.
if they're not already, there will be AI. Obviously, you wouldn't even need you could probably use existing technology to
I
just
think there are probably.
generate some messages. And I don't think they have video. You could do videos right now, but you could do photos or something like that, right?
Yeah, I've heard of people actually doing that, like not disclosing that it's AI, and they make money,
Yeah.
right? And that's because the attention economy is so bad. People are willing to suspend disbelief, or not even to. I'm sorry, I didn't have a good end to that. Yeah, people do that with AI. There's a lot of money, I suppose, in it. And we're just gonna get more of the same.
By the way, you don't have to answer this, but are you in Northern California?
Southern.
Okay, well, never mind.
Oh,
All right.
Well, I mean,
Curious
if we're talking,
that, yeah.
Well, if we're talking about the dead male quotient, or the ratio, which the ratio is exist. If you ever guy put on parties or whatever, that a 60-40 situation is a totally different situation from a 55-45, etc. Well, I mean, as everyone knows, that Northern California, San Francisco, is a really, really bad place to meet a girl because there's too many males, and it's tough. Now in New York City, but of course, by the same token, there's less reason for a sort of young, marriageable, professional male to be in New York City, because he's not trying to be an ad executive for Vogue or something. He wants to program computers, so he's going to be in Northern California. But yeah, so that was a myth.
Yeah, I do notice that there are, a good number of girls in New York City. I don't think that's ever really been a problem as far as being able to find somebody there. But I think what a lot of the conversations have been lately was that because of apps like Tinder, for example, it's going to be way easier for girls to create this gated community around whoever they end up seeing. And lately, I don't know, Naama, what you think about this as well as the rest of you guys, but there has been this recent meme about women in the gym intentionally setting up cameras to see if guys are going to be looking at them as is, for better or worse, the male instinct. Like, if there are going to be certain stimuli that you're just going to react to, no matter what it, like, other than just keeping your head down, sometimes it's just going to automatically happen like that. Like, I don't know, what do you think about that? Because that may be one of the things that are also pushing guys into, you know what? Number one, the whole Tinder thing, but number two, the possible sexual harassment issues, the possible Me Tooing that would come if, for example, a girl that I'm dating decides one day, you know what, I actually don't like this guy, I'm going to fuck him over. Like, those are the things that guys are concerned about.
I think those are valid concerns, unfortunately, and I think it's pathetic and disgusting that our culture has come to that there's incentive to do that. And that's also a problem of attention economy and this social mediaized, everything's a political campaign, everything's a brand, everything's about getting all eyes on me so that I can put this photo up on whatever social media, or so that I can file like a lawsuit and be the talk of my school or the town or whatever for a while. I think men and women both have a lot of problems now, and I think that, things, systems come to a balance. Like, things have to self-correct at some point. And maybe all of this is, like you said, actually, Ronin, at the beginning, a corrective, that because our culture sort of normalizes and facilitates and encourages and even financially rewards this kind of behavior from young women to be vindictive and petty and just, very sort of self-serving and self-motivated and myopic, that that is contributing to men turning away from that. And maybe this is, a corrective to that. And maybe this will somehow help balance the scales and kind of reset things a little bit. I mean, we're talking about the very sort of extremes of behavior that I don't think most people sort of inhabit, but
there is a fear that men may have that those extremes, I could
Right.
get that bullet from the round of Russian roulette that I'm about to play.
Right.
And there is a play by the ancient Greek playwright Aristophanes called Lysistrata,
Yes,
which talks
yes,
about
yes, yes.
which talks
Pussy
about
strike.
how the women withheld sex from the men because they wanted them to go to war.
Right.
And I'm curious what everybody thinks about this. What if the whole AI waifu thing would be a way for men to say, you know what, because there's all these risks in getting into a relationship, I'm going to withhold getting into a relationship with women at all, and, you know, let women do whatever they please, but I'm just going to be doing my own thing over here with this AI waifu, and then eventually women are going to come around and say, you know what, we're going to have to figure something out here. I don't know.
Fair enough. If
Yes.
that's the motivation, then fair enough.
Hard disagree.
All right, go for it, Bogbeef.
The male desire for sexual entertainment is essentially infinite. You're not going to come up with some way to meet that, and you can see that through essentially other communities that aren't that can get sex that isn't gate kept by women. It's basically infinite, all day, every day, any way, all the time. So there's no way to do that. All you're just sort of doing is taking yourself further into the distance from having a real life.
I can't imagine any of these things actually working. But
unless all the men get Neuralink and just agree with with each other all at the same point, we're all going to unanimously do this thing, and that way we're going to set the equilibrium back. But I see Bogbeef's point. Without there being that kind of a consensus, I can't really imagine this thing working the way that I just described it.
I also don't see, though, I don't see it doing those kinds of numbers. And I also don't think, though, that there are that many women who are behaving in the ways that we just discussed. Like, I don't think that that's common. I do think that those are also sort of, cherry-picked extreme examples of behavior. And I don't think that most men are sincerely that worried about that enough to, like, completely discourage them from, people can read a room, and we hear these stories, and there's way too much, hay made about these stories on Reddit and places like that of, like, I was sued for sexual harassment just for, like, looking at a woman. And that can certainly scare people that are already, but these are people that are already very inexperienced,
But how much has it scared people so far versus, let's say, in the 1990s? If we compare the dates, how much would you say, we have these numbers. I could just Jamie it up right now and look at the numbers as far as how many people are not in relationships today as opposed to the past, and just, like, see where exactly we're going with this.
Yeah, true, but I think that there are many reasons for that, and I think that that's plays a pretty small part in it. It might play a part, but I think that...
What are the latest statistics? Something like 38% of young men are having sex. I used to hear these complaints, and this for me started about 8 years ago. My younger friends would tell me, "Oh, I just can't get a girlfriend. I'm like, bro, you're single. Go to a bar. Like, you lift weights. Just go have a drink. See who's out. Talk to them." You could back then, or at least you could when I was their age. What happened is everybody got their phones. Their phones so much more interesting. Like, that you could be having a great conversation, feel like it's going somewhere, and somebody gets a ding. Oh, this could be the guy I really want. Yeah, they tune out. You lost all your momentum, all your capital you were building up with that person. Gone. Dating apps made that 1,000 times worse. Like, how do you get traction with anybody if their attention span is minuscule and you're not just so over the top, while at the same time not offending them, that you can meet these people in person in public spaces? And it was already an uphill, slippery battle. And then COVID just, hey, I still had hope. I went out, talked to people, and, hey, want to try this drink I'm having or this beer? Oh, no, COVID, and people just got really standoffish after that. And then also hyper politicized, where now they're wearing their slogan, their woke slogans, and so you just know stay away from them. Okay, so that takes half the population away that I can talk to now. Whereas before they might have been politically ambiguous, and I could have formed a relationship, or you or anyone could have formed a relationship and got to the politics, maybe, found a happy medium. There is no happy medium because of this polarization. So
Well, Bogbeef, I want to break this down a bit. So, Naama, I'm very curious about, let's go with Naama first. Let me know what you think about the political shirts. Also, I recall that 4chan post about the colored hair, where that's like the poisonous frogs, the sign of stay away, with the colored hair and all that stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, look, I dated a girl with colored hair. It was a very interesting experience. I had a wonderful time. Didn't work out. Obviously, you don't want to get into it, but the point is that it was a really, really fun time. So, colored hair does not mean a bad time. But anyway, Naama, let me know what you think.
I mean, I think all those are valid points, and I just think that because of all those valid points, the hyperpolarization, the political activism, the fact that everybody, needs to announce their politics, the attitudes, from Me Too and just about safe spaces in general, COVID, social media, dating apps, smartphones, atomization, all of this stuff is all happening. It's all real. And I think it all needs to be resolved. It needs to be.
How?
I don't know how. I mean, it's a very deep.
I can dip in there.
Cultural issue.
Tanning our testicles in a heat lamp is not going to fix this.
I can dip into the solution part.
All right, go for it, Bogbeef.
Give it a dip.
Okay, so I look at the big numbers and stuff, and so the big numbers here they don't really come from phones and stuff like that. Perhaps if phones and online and phone dating and stuff like that wasn't available, perhaps some of these unmarried people would be having a little bit of casual sex.
I do think, though, that kind of technology of social media in general has changed the way that people, engage with each other.
Of course, but if you look at big numbers, all that really matters is the changes we made to the United States in the 60s, particularly the late 60s, particularly with things like civil rights, before mentioned things like violence against women, bills and things like this. This is where you had women were not allowed, or it was difficult for them to get into colleges, get into professional jobs. They had jobs, but they were jobs like being seamstresses and things like this. We had a lot of change in society. If you look at the big numbers, the big graphs, what happens is everything starts going down in the late 60s. And so what would it look like to be past this? Well, you'd have a lot less bullshit jobs. You'd have a lot less people going to college, women in particular. You would have that's probably the two biggest ones. You would have the civil. I think at this point we're not going to go back to before the Civil Rights Act, but you could go back to the original language of the Civil Rights Act, which says everyone equal under the law, which I think most people would agree on now. That's fine. But if you keep up with these things, you know that Civil Rights Act has become a completely different beast in 2023 with things like disparate impact and stuff like that. And
what is disparate impact for those who don't know?
Disparate. I mean, I always encourage people to look it up. I'm going to say what it is, but look it up just so you know I'm not lying. But disparate impact, what it means is literally that it doesn't matter if intent is involved in whatever you do. If something you do has a result which helps, protected classes benefit less from, then you have committed a violation. And the Civil Rights Act beats everything else. There's a book called Age of Entitlement by Christopher Caldwell. You can read about this. But disparate impact and protected classes, this kind of thing has sort of steamrolled everything because so
and then there was also the freedom of association, which was originally embedded in the First Amendment, and Caldwell wrote about how that also ended up going the way of the dodo. And I can understand the perspective of, well, you don't want to create a society where certain people would be excluded from hotels or certain things purely based on color of their skin or whatever. But then the problem happens, like, what if you get somebody who is completely unruly, and then they could use the excuse of, oh, it was because of this or because of that they didn't let me in. And that's where a lot of the trouble starts.
I mean, so a good example of how crazy this is, let's say, Waifu Dev, you make this app. let's say that like 60% of your users or a majority of your users are something like males or white or something like that, you have effed up. You have done something wrong. And of course, how could you make it so it wouldn't come out like that? And if no one takes you to court, no one says that they have this has injured themselves, if this has done anything wrong to them, no problem. But that is how crazy it is. I know. I beg people to look up because I wouldn't have believed it until I looked it up. And this was not
the whole concept of like, not equal opportunity, but equal outcome. Like regardless of the path taken there, then we need to make sure that there are the same number of.
Well, it's like Kamala Harris starting to talk about not equality, but equity. You know, like that's where a lot of the trouble starts to brew up here.
Yeah. And this is where,
Exactly.
People talk like wokeness and all this stuff is sort of, the comic books and movies. Has that affected people? No. This has been the case for well before, the Great Awakening. So this has been the case since like the 80s and 90s and stuff, but no one really took advantage of it because it's so insane. But all these this has all been made law. It's an interpretation of the Civil Rights Act. So, but the Supreme Court could reset back to OG Civil Rights Act tomorrow. They could do that if they wanted to.
So then I want to get two questions in here, and Naama, I would love for you to respond as well. I just want to make sure I get these two questions in before I forget. The first question is, well, it's actually one question of two possibilities. So the question is, let's say we look 10, 20, 30 years from now, either two things happened. Either it just starts increasing and then it gently caresses back into whatever is the equilibrium, whatever ends up working well for both men and women as well as race relations, various things like that. Or things get to a point because of the instability of this kind of law where people genuinely see like, hey, this is unfair what's happening, but it only keeps getting worse and worse and worse. At a certain point, it may hit, I don't even know what to describe it as, but it would be people, again, like joining in gangs of people who they know and they trust and fighting against those who they distrust. And that I see as being, especially in New York City right now with the crime increasing, that I see as being a possibility, although I'm not saying it's the possibility. But those are the two avenues that I see this thing going through. Bogbeef, I know this kind of goes beyond the Robo Waifus, although who knows, maybe one camp will like protect themselves with the robot waifus. They'll be like the fembots from Austin Powers, like with the breasts with the machine guns in them. But either way, there could be something that there could be something of that sort of going back to tribalism, not because you want to, but because things have just gotten so incredibly divided that tribalism will have to exist before there is a new kind of order that's put in place. So that's the avenue I don't want to go down to, but do you think that there is a likelihood that's going to happen versus my first avenue, which is things are extreme right now, but then eventually we find equilibrium and we learn to get along and we learn to undo some of these things that are unfair without having to resort to that higher level going on?
Okay, so what you're talking about there, I think you could. I think we could accurately predict. It's likely that China will be involved in this business in some capacity, and I would bet, if we've seen what they've done in the past, it's likely they'll export this to other countries, and they'll probably restrict it at home. And some of that probably feels like, hey, we're Chinese. We're going back to the question of the brother or the son. That would you want them doing it? They'll feel like, we prefer that the Chinese people wouldn't do that. And in America, if we went back, say 100 years ago, there was a group of people that even if they weren't exactly the same as the average American, there was the Boston Brahmin. These people ruled the United States, and they knew that they ruled the United States. These were the people that built the Harvards and the J.P. Morgans and all these, and the Roosevelts and all these people. And so even if they weren't exactly like Americans, they felt like, well, the America is our country. We rule it, and we don't want bad things to happen so much to Americans. And that's gone. It's now you have the sort of factionalism where it's like if you make decisions in this country, well, maybe you perhaps like to squirrel it to your group, or you feel like, we could just steal the money now and someone else will be in charge tomorrow. There isn't sort of anyone that takes responsibility for ruling this country. This is why nobody gives a shit about things like the marriage rate, etc. At one time, it's hard to believe, but people did care about these things, and people like my family fought them in the Civil War. But we were better off when the Boston Brahmin ruled this country. That's a story for another day.
One other thing I just want to add about the Boston Brahmin. There was a recent, and I promise we're going to get back to the Robo Waifu. Speaking of which, everybody, smash the subscribe button, smash the like button since I have the floor now, and be sure to click the bell. Not enough people click the bell. And also sneed those super chats right now. Sneed those super chats. So there was a recent statue that was unveiled in the New York City courthouse. I'm not sure which courthouse it was, but it's this, in terms of the face, like it looks all right, like it looks like a realistic face. The body looks like a body of a Barbie doll standing on top of a lotus. Instead of arms, they're just like these tentacles, like something out of H.P. Lovecraft. And
It looks like a Final Fantasy boss, dude. It's crazy.
yes,
No,
exactly.
it's like
It's got the
blue
demon
thing.
horns.
Courage.
Fucking Genova.
So, but the reason why I bring it up is I think what they were going for the statue. It says over here. So the artist says it's part of an urgent and necessary cultural reckoning underway as New York reconsiders traditional representation of power in public spaces and recasts civic structures to better reflect 21st century social mores. Now, the ironic thing that I find in here, maybe it's not ironic, but the thing that I find very interesting is if you take a look at the statues on that very same courthouse, including the one that's on the roof, you're going to see a female goddess holding two torches, which is the exact depiction of the Greek goddess Hecate. And below that, you see a goddess that looks like Athena, and you see various other entities. There's like a goat, there's like an owl. So this has like paganism all over it as far as being, something not quite, like Christian moralism, something that I think a lot of those Brahmins, Bogbeef, that you were talking about had kind of an interest in, like they like the idea of like this Promethean quality that ancient Greece had, ancient Rome had, and they want to emulate that because there's something very powerful about that. And I think that today, the people who look at these statues, the ones who did this new statue or enacted it, all they see is just like a white marble men, like old white men. I don't even think it registers into their head the fact that these are like ancient Greek and Roman gods and, pagan entities and things like that. I don't even think they consider it. I don't even think there's like anything inside of their head that even knows what the word pagan is or what ancient Rome is other than maybe reading about it in school and they're forgetting it. That's the level of people I think we're working with right now. And in a way, it gives me hope because I don't think these people are that talented at doing much. So whatever they do, eventually it's going to fall apart. Before we get back to the waifus, Naama, Bogbeef, Maida, AI Waifu, any thoughts on what I just said?
I think that loops back into the waifus in a very interesting way. Today, there's nothing for men to take pride in, right? Like we have recruitment issue right now because no one takes pride in the country anymore. The left doesn't, the right doesn't. And if you don't take pride in something like big, you won't have the confidence to take pride in your job, which it keeps trickling down further and further to where you lack the confidence to approach women. And it might seem super abstract, but unless we somehow reform what America stands for and make it inspiring again, because no one finds the current iteration of America inspiring, we're going to continue to have the same problems.
And the waifu helps with that. How?
Oh, it just addresses the economy of it. I can't control the country.
It's the next place we go to when this boat sinks.
Okay, I've got a new solution for you. I just thought of
Okay.
the waifu verse is now a nation, and we will build that nation and take over everything.
All right, I kind of like the sound of this. But Bogbeef, before we go back to the waifu, any thoughts on the Boston Brahmins and their interest in these Greek and Roman gods and erecting all of these neoclassical buildings? I don't know what the situation was in the South when it comes to that. I'm sure that there were, obviously there were like the statues that were being taken off of certain Civil War generals, things like that. I'm not sure if they were also made in that pagan type of style. Any thoughts on that, just as a side?
Oh yeah, so the Confederates also were obsessed with Greek and Roman and things like this. We talk about subscribe to Good Old Boys podcast if you want to hear more about the Boston Brahmin, which by the way, I think is like, it's bizarre that no one talks about that there used to be like a ruling aristocracy of this country and like no one knows about it. I'm curious to ask you, I assume you went to a good school, Lev.
I went to School of Visual Arts, but I learned about a lot of this stuff, I say even way before that, just because like I grew up in New York City. I saw those beautiful buildings around everywhere, and I was like, what is going on here? Why are there buildings that look like the ruins of fucking Atlantis that are just next to all of these boxes? Like, why are these buildings so beautiful? And I guess from there I kind of gotten curious about sacred geometry and things like that. And like for all the hippies who go to Burning Man, these neoclassical buildings, they're way more psychedelic than whatever comes out of Burning Man. But anyway.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about like, so do you know like Cotton Mather?
No, not familiar. Unfortunately.
Okay, well, just I mean, imagine what one of these early American, these people were. Remember, they were kicked out of Europe for being psychotically religious. They were really, really religious, and imagine what someone like what they would have thought of like social media or something. You know, they would have despised this, but. Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious. I assume you learned that at a good school, because think about how many people probably are going into professional jobs, leadership jobs in the United States now that don't really know about things like the Boston Brahmin and things like that. And I saw people in the comments talking about, why would you talk about something like that? Well, it's very important when you talk about like why does no one sort of see America as a going concern? Why does nobody really care about this country? About these kinds of huge decisions that about people being married, about the relationship between races, religions, genders, and things like this. Why does no one care? Well, that's part of the story.
But here's a big difference, and I know, Naama, I would love to get your response, but before I forget, I think a really big difference here is that was not a dictatorship. That was people who had a lot of influence being able to use that influence while at the same time allowing for there to be a system of courts and rights that were given to people. And I think today, if somebody was to try and resurrect that, the concern would be that it would be some beyond populist, like a dictator type who would assume all of power.
Yarvin's purple dictator.
Yes.
I would like to invoke Yarvin's purple.
Well, you got
dictator
purple
right
in the
now.
background there. So something like that, I think, is not really the way to go either, because it's not really resurrecting the Boston Brahmins. It's basically giving somebody, like, look, if you look at Trump, for example, I would say that even if he has better taste, because at least he has columns, the way that he decorates those columns is way too ostentatious for my taste. I know it doesn't really go with what we're talking about here that much, but the idea that you would give one person that much power over people, I don't think it was the same situation with them. I think they understood that there are certain limits that even they have, and there are certain ways that they have to act, and if they don't act those ways, then they're going to let down their ancestors, they're going to let down, whoever else, in the metaphysical scheme of things, they're going to let down the Greek gods,
Well, let's be clear, though. You didn't vote for Boston Brahmins. And I think what you're saying is sort of makes them not just a brutal dictatorship, is that they would bring in local elites. And they would bring in people that weren't them, by the way. So like John F. Kennedy was someone they were like, well, this guy has talent. He's Catholic. He's not one of us. He doesn't come from one of us, but we'll bring him in, and et cetera.
They were like Deng Xiaoping, for example, in his later years. After he stepped down, he was still in the background guiding certain things, and people went to him for advice. And I think in terms of China, he did a pretty good job back when he was around. Like, I don't know what he would think of Xi Jinping today, but
100 years ago, if you were an elite in California, in Texas, in Alabama, you had to be trained. You had to learn what is right and wrong from college. And college was college. The whole concept of college is basically just a religious indoctrination created by these people. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world, by the way. I know it sounds bad, but it
almost reminds me, and again, I'm not really sure what exactly the activities, other than the pardon everybody, like the jacking off in the skull, in the crypt that the Skull and Bones do. But in general, the pattern that I'm getting here is that you had these Ivy League universities, and you had these very rich and well-connected people who attended. What did they learn? They learned Greek, they learned Latin. It's almost like you have a continuation from the ancient Roman days of the aristocracy attending these mystery schools and knowing what exactly the universe is in a way, or at least getting to a higher level of that understanding, and from there being able to be a good pillar of the community. That at least, yeah.
To bring it back to the conversation, which, by the way, you had to know Greek and Latin to apply to these places. And also, you had to not be a woman. And you had to not be a woman to go play at their golf courses, at their country clubs, to go to their Mason meetings, to do all, there's 1,000 different, in the Flintstones, they had the Elk Club or whatever, the
Water Buffalo.
And they sort of kept power away from women. This is one, like, these people that a lot of people think they were the original libs and all this kind of stuff. Well, they didn't think women should have power, by the way. And
the Masons still don't. The Masons don't accept women still.
No, they have there's a separate part with the Rainbow Girls and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but the Masons, all that shit is done. These people are done. They're out. It's over for this. Or if you're Massachusetts politics, the Boston Brahmins still exist. They still have some weight, but they don't rule this country anymore.
So then there's the question of without that power structure being in place, it feels like that area is going to fall apart. And when it falls apart, the area of people who are supposed to keep track of what's going on and rule in this in a non-dictatorial type of way, then eventually do you think it's going to come again through a different direction? Maybe through Break the Rules? Maybe some of the people we have here are going to be the next Boston Brahmin, and this is all a training center for the future Boston Brahmins? I don't know.
This is the cycle of history. I mean, all the Brahmin and the Harvards and the Yales, which extended to, if you go to school in New Zealand now, you're going to get your education was designed by someone that from Harvard or Yale. All this started from a boat with how many people on it? 35 people on it. The Mayflower. And so we're back in the spin side. We're back in this cycle of history. I don't think the cycle of history has been beaten. I think you have the weak men make this the hard times and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Where it's time to spin the wheel again.
I would say that, go on. Yeah.
On that note, this woman will leave the rest of the discussion to the Masons and the Brahmins here. She's not interested in being part of that club anyway. Leave that to the men, and she's got a child to take care of.
Well, Naama, before you go, any final thoughts on the AI waifu question?
Naama, have you ever wanted to go? You ever wanted to star in a debutante ball?
I would love to.
Yeah. See, and you'll meet
Naama.
Men with
yeah.
Suits
All I have to say is Namaste. Namaste. There you go.
Naama, thank you for joining, and thank you for your commentary and being candid with us today.
My pleasure. I think we've all, but I don't think we've settled this.
No, we got to do another one. And Naama, where could people find you, and how can people support you?
Find me on Twitter at Incel Project at Naama Kates. I have a podcast, Incel, you can find anywhere. And you can support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Naama Kates, and become a patron of the show. Yes, that's it.
Excellent.
I would love for you to try the Waifuverse app.
I would love to try, actually. I really would. I'm very curious.
I'll DM you on Twitter.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent. And that's what the Break the Rules does, ladies and gentlemen. We bring all these people together. Naama, thank you so much for coming in, and I will see you soon. We're going to continue this conversation. Doejenggles, I wonder if Doejenggles can come in. I'm not sure what exactly is happening with her because there were some Wi-Fi problems on her end, but we're going to see what happens with Doejenggles. Hopefully she comes in, and I'm going to ask my friend Catherine Brodsky. Maybe she wants to come in. But anyway, back to the conversation. One other thing that I want to note to Bogbeef about what you said regarding the boats coming in here, there was also a group of people that you could trace going all the way back to, let's say, Queen Elizabeth and John Dee, her magic wizard guy, who is the guy who coined the British Empire, and how there was, I believe, an influence, and I still have to read this book. I only read excerpts of it, called Albion Seed. I'm sure, Bogbeef, you're familiar with that book, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there were also, beyond a lot of the religious guys, there was also a bloodline going back to people who were within the British aristocracy, who I think continued on a lot of these various mystical mystery school traditions. So I don't know, any thoughts on that? And then we're getting right back to AI waifus. So let me know.
Oh, I don't know. I don't really think a whole lot about the mystery stuff, because I mean every college in the country has the sort of these fraternities, the Greek fraternities. These things do all the stuff from that, and I don't know. It doesn't seem to matter much. I mean, there were a lot, by the way, there was a lot of other people in the United States than just the Mayflower people. You had the Jamestown people and stuff like that, but they didn't build this kind of stuff that the Mayflower people had.
That's true. So anyway, back to the wife.
By the way,
Yes.
I just want to say,
Yes.
I'm a Confederate. I'm a Southern. I don't like the Boston.
I couldn't tell. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, fuck the Boston Brahmin. However, that doesn't discount anything I said before.
By the way, what have you seen Razor Fist's mini documentary on Abraham Lincoln on YouTube?
Oh, I haven't. I saw it recommended in my thing that said he was bad. So I'm sure I would love that. But...
Yeah, it was very surprising. Certain things I learned about Lincoln there, like how censorious he was about anybody who wrote anything bad about him. Like he would arrest reporters for writing bad things about him, and how he didn't really care at all about the issue of slavery, where he didn't do anything to the northern states, which kept slavery. For him, it was just a cudgel to go against the South. Now, that's at least what I learned from him. Any thoughts on that?
Well, something that's been papered over, and from what I understand, so there was a lot of different people with different ideas about slavery in the United States at that time, and there wasn't very many people, but they were influential, and they were especially influential in these sort of Boston Brahmin circles that were the abolitionists. These are the John Brown. We're gonna free the slaves. There was other people like out west, especially, and other places that felt like, well, slavery is bad because it involves black people. We don't want black people here. And this has been totally papered. I mean, this is why I don't know, like black people weren't allowed in Washington for a very long time, and they were against slavery. But that's why they were against slavery. There's a lot of people who feel like the Rules for Radicals book about the leftist book. In that book, it says to be a great leader of a political movement, it's better if you do not believe in the core tenets of that movement, because then you can make the deals. You can make moves. Whereas if you're just a true believer, you don't really have. You're just a fanatic, and that way, and a lot of people believe that's why Abraham Lincoln was chosen to be this leader, because he wasn't really a true blue abolitionist, and there were a lot of ideas about sending them back to Africa, and all this stuff has just been papered over to make a nice, happy little story.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
yeah,
the leading Confederate philosopher said that they should start enslaving Northern whites. There's all kinds of very interesting stuff.
Never start a conversation about the Civil War with the Southerner.
So
we'll be here.
Yes.
Yeah, Lev.
It's true.
Oh, I did want to again thank Naama for being here and arguing in good faith, and I think she has a good heart. However, and the time for women like her has passed. Though, if they were still around, if they were more like her, we wouldn't have the problem we have today. So
how do you know there aren't that many women like her? I'm not saying that there's a lot, but I don't think any of us are looking to find people who are in the majority. Like at the end of the day,
it's the attitude. There's again, it's a kind of a Naxalt thing. Like a lot of us in the MGTOW sphere and manosphere. I hate to use those archaic words at this point, but we have this view of women as petty, solipsistic, and failing the Piaget water level test. But what really is going on is, there are still people out there trying their best. Many of my friends are women, and they're great people. I might have even wanted to get with some of them if they weren't already involved with other people. So it's not hopeless, but I'm going to say that there's going to be a segment of society that may, and this is where I'm going to lay the groundwork for the whole outer space transhumanist thing. This is where we get into science fiction. We're going from MGTOW to science fiction. That's the phase 2 that I talked about earlier. There's going to be a breakaway, a sort of birthing from the womb of Earth, where higher but more, peculiar, maybe even autistic segment of humanity breaks off to become post-biological, and that Robo Waifus will be the key and the bridge to that, with in combination with artificial wombs so as to perpetuate ourselves. And that's kind of the groundwork. We can either cover that sort of sci-fi realm in this, or save that for another conversation. I didn't want to take away more time from AI Waifu Dev, who has a real product right now. VR, AR, augmented reality. You can put on your glasses, have any. It's not just the waifus that he has on the app. You can. He's asked me for a 2B model, so I can upload 2B, have her sit with me at the cafe. Yeah, she can't. Have a latte with me, but she can sit with me in AR and augmented reality.
What I can do first is I would want to talk about the AI waifu development first, and then get into the transhumanism, because I want to see if I can get Gennady Stoliarov II on this. It's going to be totally last minute, but he is the president of the United States Transhumanist Party, and he's been on the not president. He hates when I say that. No, chair. He's the chair of the Transhumanist Party, and I messaged him. Maybe he's gonna come on. I don't know. Who knows? But either way, I want to get to the waifu development, and first ask you about the style. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that so many people? I mean, look at the avatar that I used for the thumbnail there from Chabits. Why do you think a lot of men are attracted to like the big eyes, like the bulgy eyes, and the sharp chin, and that kind of like anime style? Why do you think that's become so popular that we have e-girls that are emulating it in their makeup?
Oh, that's super interesting. There's been an evolution in anime, and anime girls don't have to go through a whole life cycle. The artists just continue to iterate over and over and over again. Just like an AI algorithm, we're selecting the features that are liked most. And I theorize, going back to the transhumanism, if we have enough time, women will begin to look like anime girls. And that's why a lot of the makeup tries to get closer to that ideal, right? So that's why men fall for anime girls, because they're actually more ideal aesthetically, because we've built it up over time through quick iterations of evolution.
Now, nobody has those eyes in real life.
Not yet.
I don't know, Bogbeef, would you date a girl who has, like, forget AI waifus, but let's say there's a girl who goes through some kind of a cellular regeneration process where all of a sudden she gets, like, these big anime eyes? Like, the closest thing I could think of is that Robert Rodriguez version of, what was that movie? I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys must have watched it, right? It's that anime, the one that's about that robot girl who gets
many of those.
Who gets built by the scientists. God damn it!
Oh my gosh!
Alita Battle Angel.
Yes, yes, exactly. So you remember what she looked like, right? Like, she had more or less a realistic human face, but she had those big anime eyes going on. So, Bogbeef, I don't know if you're married, I don't know if you have a girlfriend, but in the case that you were single and ready to mingle, would you be interested in dating a girl like that? Just to see, like, do you also share in this kind of anime aesthetic that you notice a lot of single men are getting into?
Well, I mean, has anyone ever, I don't know if people have ever seen when they use AI graphics or just artists in general will make fleshy versions of cartoon, because we're talking about something that looks good in cartoon. Mm. And whenever they make a fleshy version of this, it doesn't look good. And so I have my doubts, and humans are very, very tuned in to the face. I mean, just a little bitty different. Like we'll say, oh, she's got these big, beautiful blue eyes, and they'll just be like 1 or 2% bigger than the next one. But we are very, very, very tuned into people's faces. And so it wouldn't be something I would sit here and debate. It would be if I saw a picture and if it was a meat, it was flesh, even in a rendering, just not anime drawing. And if it was attractive, I couldn't say that it wasn't, but I haven't seen that yet. We've seen these. Yeah. Go ahead.
Lev, I sent you a picture on Twitter. Are you able to display an image on the screen?
Whoa!
To demonstrate.
My bottle almost fell over. You know what? I think I will. I think I
don't
would
want that
be,
pee getting everywhere.
No, I don't. I think I would be able to do that. I just have to open up another instance over here of OBS so everything's okay with this window. So just give me a little bit of time. But while I'm doing that, can you verbally describe what exactly you're talking about here? And then I'm going to put the image on. See, I became gray again, and now I'm not hearing you. No, now I hear you. Yeah. No, everything's fine. Just let me know what exactly you're talking about here with the image.
Wait, I can't hear Ronin. Can you hear him?
You can't hear Ronin?
I was muted. I muted myself on here.
There we go.
So
Bogbeef,
yeah, Bogbeef is correct. The fleshy version of anime is uncanny and grotesque. But what happens when you cross the threshold of anime and physical, structure? You have, I don't know if you ever seen like the ball jointed dolls with the very immaculate faces and the clear complexions and kind of a beauty under their own. And I've often said that the Robo Waifu is not going to be a one-for-one replacement of a human relationship. No, it won't. It's not going to ever be a fair trade for a woman. It's going to be another secret third thing, as they say. So it will take a different kind of appreciation. But there are stories of men being in love with their battleship, their tools, their car, whatever. Men are remarkably flexible in what they can form, of what we can form attachments to and have feelings for. So the Robo Waifu is not off the table in that regard, and having it be a physical manifestation of the anime aesthetic doesn't mean it has to be a grotesque cartoonified human like we discussed. So there is some room, but I will concede that your initial judgment on that is correct.
From my tests, I actually changed the base anime models to before they go into the waifuverse and make their heads smaller, because in VR it's fine because the context is different, but once you're in a human context, you have to tone it back down, right? So, but over time, humanity will converge to bigger eyes, bigger heads, and the context of what physical features there are will change.
So I don't know, Bogbeef, what do you think about that so far?
I would just Cindy Crawford, Playboy, mid-90s, black and white photo shoot. I mean, I would just put that up against any sort of cartoon rendering. And honestly, I think the cartoon rendering, we're even more when you're talking when you're dealing with the cartoon and stuff. I don't want to rehash the debate, but obviously I just think this is essentially masturbation tools, and in anime, well, that there's no problem with there, because you're just, what's the difference? You're just people masturbate to all kinds of things. It's who cares? But you're really off the reservation of even pretending there's anything girlfriendy if it's not even meat in the picture. In my opinion, we don't have to go through that all over again.
Well, what if it's
there's a feeling,
circuits, pistons, hydraulics, actuators, meat in a I mean, the substrate doesn't matter. The substrate, biological wet muscle, or
it's not there.
Polymers. You can say
all right,
say
here
that.
I loaded it up, by the way. Bogbeef, you can take a look. Let me know what you think.
So my goal though is to have a Robo Waifu that when someone like Bogbeef makes that statement and says, well, you're just masturbating, it would be this would be the Turing test of a Robo Waifu. If she would actually turn around and address the person directly and have a really snappy comeback that made everyone, just crack them up.
The reason why people are, that we were talking earlier about terrorist research and like, well, are men going to just go around shooting people because they're not having a girlfriend? Well, I really like classic cars, but no one would ever say that would happen because of a classic car. The reason for that includes the bad feelings, and this is what doesn't exist. So if you start talking to a girl and you really like the girl, and you have a phone call, or you're expecting a phone call, or you have it will. I mean, it's electrifying. It goes through every pore of your body. You are wrecked.
Used to be. It used to be. It just isn't anymore. That girl you got the crush for is getting backdoored that night while you're texting her, honey, I miss you. We had such a nice talk today. And she's just deeper.
Well, there's no amount of philosophy that's going to take that away. We are wired.
It's just they have too many options to these days, man. So the phone has connected them to too many options.
We have Doejenggles. We have Doejenggles in here. What I'm going to do, since I turned into I Love Lucy mode over here, because
you've all seen the memes.
Because I opened up another instance of OBS, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh the browser. Doejenggles is here. I know there's problems with the internet right now on your end, Do, so I really appreciate you coming in. As soon as I refresh...
Yeah, sorry about everything. It's we've had 15-mile-an-hour winds here all day, and I just come home to no power. That really
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. The only thing I would ask you is, while I refresh, can you please share this the stream link with your people so they know that the great Doejenggles is finally here on BTR, because otherwise they're probably not watching.
Yeah, let me try to do it because I have 50 minutes.
All right, no problem at all. Here, I'm going to refresh right now, everybody. Hang tight. I'm refreshing this thing. Here we go. And by the way, everybody, make sure to subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell. Now I'm not.
Are you going to give us a little background on yourself and who you are?
Yeah, and let me know if you can turn the camera on. I don't know how you're doing battery-wise, though. Maybe that's not a great idea.
My battery is I'm pretty much. I think I'm at 40%. And I don't know when this shit's coming back on.
40%'s
so I
not
just thought I'd pop on when I can. I don't know if it's going to eat up a lot.
What if you can just go camera on mode only if you want to? Unless you're who knows, covered in chocolate or whatever. I don't know. If you want to turn it on.
I just don't know how much it's gonna. Like I said, I'm sitting here in the dark right now, so I just gotta pop in and say hi. I am so sorry about all this.
No problem at all.
So scuffed.
All right, so
and being on my phone is super scuffed. So
no worries. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you run the Real Weird Sickos podcast with the great Masked Bastard, who is a good friend of the show. He's been here a ton, and I always love having Masked Bastard on. And we have Bogbeef, by the way, here. I don't know, Do, if you know Bog or not, but he has a wonderful podcast called Good Old Boys with a Z, patreon.com/Good Old Boys. So be sure to check that out.
Hey guys, I think this is a good time for me to split. I got a big day tomorrow, but thanks everybody for having me. Had a great time. Good Old Boys at Patreon. Thank you.
Excellent. Bogbeef, thank you so much, man. I look forward to having you on again soon.
Excellent. We'll see.
Take care.
Take care. So,
all right.
With the time that we have right now, I want to get Doe's opinion on this anime girl that you see over here to the right of the screen.
Oh God, I can't even see anything. Hold on.
All right, she's gonna be back.
No. All right,
but okay, so, I'll give you my opinion.
I did an internet hiccup a minute ago, so I didn't get to say bye properly to Bogbeef, but that was why. No hard feelings or anything. I thought he brought up a lot of really good points, and I don't necessarily disagree with them. I just think that there are people that live in a different world, and that he lives in a different world.
See everything now.
And,
I'm so sorry.
I'm addressing the concerns of people that live in that world. Maybe for him, just lift weights, buy a manly truck and go talk to girls at bars. And dude, yeah, if it were 1992, I would be there in a minute.
Let's see what Doejenggles has to say about all this. Doejenggles, do you see the image on the right side of the screen?
I do.
Okay, what do you think? Is this the future for men? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, if Photoshop keeps going the way that it does, I'll tell you a quick story. I met a prominent e-girl pretty recently. And what ended up happening was I met her and didn't even realize it was her for half the day.
That's crazy.
That's how much filters.
For half the day, because the AI, the Photoshop was so real, So I kind of think we are already getting this expectation of how people are supposed to look in our heads. So I think looking at this waifu, it is the future. And I think unfortunately it could be the future because people, this is what the strive is for. And this is what the next generation, I don't know how old the rest of you are. I'm 31, so it seems like it's the future, unfortunately.
So let me emphasize, this is not supposed to be a sex doll. That's not the direction we're going. This being would have a personality, would talk to you like you or me, would have feelings, would want to go for walks with you and ask you about your day when you come back from work. Like,
Waifu.
That's where we're going with that. Thank you. All right. Just some people think that we're advocating for silicone.
No, I think Doe.
No,
you're more within the sphere, like you know what they're talking about.
It's the expectation, and you know what? Unfortunately, if you're just going to get something that looks good and just agrees with everything that you say, unfortunately, that's not real. Even if it was real, it's not real.
Oh, well, you got to use AI Waifu Dev's app, because the first thing I notice is how fucking argumentative she is. I jump in there and she's like, "Are you sure you want to do this? I think you're full of it," and blah 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 blah.
I've told her to be more agreeable now.
Because you have to work with her.
If the waifu isn't, if she's not asking if a waitress at a restaurant is prettier than her, then she's not real.
A little bit of the pushback I'm finding is actually a good thing, because I found it more rewarding when she started to mellow down and sync up with me. So like what I was talking about, AI Waifu Dev, was that the bug is a feature. Maybe you could sell it as, hey, train this, rogue AI is going to be a little raw and rough to you, but maybe be sweet to her and get her to be the way you want her to be. That'll make people think they have some agency in directing the personality of the waifu, and that's a selling point.
Now,
I really like that.
Yeah.
I have a philosophy that the perfect relationship isn't perfect in any means. Meaning, people need the fight, they need the problems, and if you don't have problems, you're going to make the problems. And there's an up and down curve somewhere in there that I've got to discover. That is the most enthralling relationship, because pure pleasure isn't very satisfying.
Now, there is a bit of a Ruh-Roh a la Scooby-Doo situation that I'm sensing from the comment over here by Kiwi Smith in the chat, who says, let's see over here, shark teeth, and then talk about love some flat too. The giant bazongas is not essential. Okay, so the Ruh-Roh situation, as it were, would be if people would decide to, I got to make sure that she goes back in here because I want her to be present for what I'm about to ask as a woman. I think it is very important. But you guys can talk about this too. But okay, let's do this. I
think I know where you're going with this.
You know where I'm going with this.
I can critique.
I will vouch for Kiwi. I think he just means an aesthetic and not anything illegal.
No, but the question is that at that point, what exactly happens when people will have like full potential to have whatever the hell they want, and where is the line drawn when it comes to that kind of stuff? Or where should it be drawn?
Oh, well, right now people can have any kind of doll. Somebody can go to their basement and make a fucking doll that looks like a 7-year-old and do whatever they want to it. Who's going to know? Who's going to stop them? Right? Like, should we let companies do that? I think if a company was marketing that, they deserve the shade they're going to get for that, right? Like that should be a situation that takes care of itself. I'm just a little bit opposed, if not all the way opposed, to policing that, because it becomes a slippery slope. You could easily look at 2B, for instance, and somebody could say, oh, she looks like a 16-year-old girl. What do you, a grown man, want with her? And I'm not seeing it that way. She's developed, she's ladylike, but yeah, small chin, slender figure might get some people who can't attain that to get really angry and decide, well, that's only because she looks 14 or 15 and that's going to be illegal, right? So the slippery slope is what bothers me about that.
The thing that people are worried about also with the slippery slope is in the other direction too. If we're talking about, for example, there being a teaching early on of sexual orientation in kindergarten, and that is like the other thing where when you start exposing kids who are not ready to, know certain piece of information yet and would be confused about whatever the hell they're being taught by these woke normie teachers of theirs, then that's going to mess them up. And same thing when it comes to, let's say, people, what would you say would mess a person up, and what would you say would be like having free reign? Even if a part of them does get messed up, it doesn't really matter in the long haul, because as long as they're not hurting anybody, like basically how far should a person's degeneracy or whatever you want to call it be allowed to go to as far as having those. Imagine, like, forget robot waifus. Imagine being able to generate whatever you want, like any thought that you might have, being able to generate that in real time, in virtual reality, where that's the experience that you're living in. And at that point, you say, you know what, let's lock this. Like, let's say somebody's a cannibal. Somebody wants to eat people, okay? And let's say they create a virtual reality landscape where they just go like Kirby and just like, nom, 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 just like eat everybody in sight. What exactly happens to that person if they're just going to be kept in there? Are we going to lock them in the goon cave? Are we going to lock them in their virtual reality goon cave where they'll get to indulge in any sadistic fantasy they want to? And is that going to be all right? Like, is that just going to be them? Or if enough people are going to be that way, are we going to see like a big societal shift where at a certain point, if people are going to go outdoors, all of a sudden they're going to think, you know what, maybe Hannibal Lecter's got a point. Maybe I can figure out some way to like, earn a degree in psychology and then get all these impressionable students and then, invite them over for dinner,
So aren't these the same arguments, though, that were used for novels back in the Middle Ages? Like, oh, the printing press is going to bring debauchery. People can write about anything. They'll be writing about cannibalism or comics. Now, granted, the comics industry had a comics code to keep kind of that. And I think maybe this will have the same. Maybe when waifus come out, Robo Waifus come out, there will be an independent agency saying, okay, you got to conform to this code to get the seal. Yes, it's still legal to make a Robo Waifu or an AI waifu without the seal, but it's going to be frowned upon and no one's going to want to sell it.
Interesting.
Because it's going to be conflated with pedos and whatnot. Sorry to use that word, but I don't want to.
Yeah, we got to be careful of the YouTube algorithm. But this is Doejenggles, by the way. This is what Doejenggles looks like. Right. I'm going to try to get Doejenggles back in here. Right now we have a virtual Doejenggles, if you will. Maybe I'll do like an impression of her, and that's going to be like a AI waifu doll. But
we should have made her an AI as backup, right? So we program all of her words in there, so it'll act like her in case she cuts out. Next time we'll have to do another 5 months of prep work and get that rolling.
So we have a couple of comments here. So we have a comment from Dr. Asuro, who is a good friend of the show. He's been on here a bunch, and he says tulpa Lev. So tulpas, from what I understand, they are thought forms. So a tulpa would be when you come up with something like, okay, dig this. What if every single thought that we have ever thought exists, meaning that we give life to it, meaning that it doesn't exist in this dimension, but there is another dimension where every single fantasy we've ever had has come to life. And what are the repercussions of that? Because there's certain theosophical works that write about these tulpas and how if a tulpa is given enough power, it will be able to then not only have like this brief life of not really being that effective, but actually being able to haunt people, including haunting the creator, and then going on to haunt other people if there's like enough power given to this tulpa. And I know that today in a very materialistic society, we don't really take credence of that idea or think, well, that's impossible. Whatever is in your head can never get out. It's like, but that's such a stupid way of thinking about it, because it's like we imagine
everything's
that
in our
head. Yeah. Like our head, it's not like thinking that the thoughts that we have are in our head, to me, is like thinking that God is a man who lives up in the sky, above the planet Earth. It's a very archaic way, I think, of looking at reality. I think
it's reductionist.
Yeah, I think like a more organic way would be, and Kiwi Smith has a comment here, Lev is going full Christian. Check out some of the earlier streams, by the way, where we talk about
CWCville.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the dimensional merge.
Are you ready for the dimensional merge?
Yeah, well, the dimensional merge, what that basically is the astral plane meeting together with the physical plane, where all of the goblins and ghouls and fairies and angels and demons all of a sudden start to inhabit our world. I mean, some people say it's already happening when they took a look at that girl, the one who was the, you know who I'm talking about.
FTX Grippy?
Yes. See, that was lightning fast. You figured that out. Yeah. But yeah, like there is this idea that we're going to have much more mysticism in the world, and Christianity may have been a tool to kind of keep it at bay. This was an interesting thing that Uber
And now we
Boyo...
have Christianity.
Exactly. Well, this is something that Uber Boyo was talking about earlier on, how you would have, for example, these Christians who saw that the pagans were being haunted by these fairies. Because when you think of fairies, like, don't think of like the anime girl fairies, you know, like with the little antennas and stuff like that and the bulging eyes. Think of these entities that like to not only play pranks but physically injure people and steal people's babies and replace them with like worse babies, I don't know, like changeling or whatever. That's more of the kind of fairies that were allegedly... I'm hearing your keyboard. That's the fairies that allegedly... No problem. That's the fairies that allegedly were haunting the Irish before the Catholics came and put a stop to it. So does that mean that Catholics are right? Does that mean that Christianity is the one true religion? I don't think it does. What it means, yes.
Here's what I believe. I believe that collective consciousness forms entities, and that if you believe in a God, it'll become real, right? So, yeah, Christianity's right as long as Christianity has enough people to foster that belief. Right, the pagans were right while they were dominant. Right, the fairies were right where they're dominant. Today, the gods are celebrities and businesses. There's a reason why attention is so important. Right, the one thing we pay for now is attention. Your eyeballs are important. We have people in this podcast where they're paying their attention, sometimes real money, but the attention gives credence to everything.
And sneed those super chats, by the way. Speaking of money, speaking of real people, the people who are watching this right now, you better sneed those super chats. But yeah, I agree with you. I know what you're talking about here. Like we have the situation with Christianity in the past where people who were bishops and friars and such, I think they understood that there was more to life than just whatever you see. And I think spending time praying gives you that kind of understanding. But at the same time, like you said, like, I don't think Christianity would necessarily be the be-all, end-all. I think it's a vehicle. I think it's like a spiritual technology that people can use to get people into a certain frame of mind where collectively they would be able to use that to keep off the demons. And I wish that more Christians could see it that way, where maybe there could be more skepticism as far as, like, we don't know whether or not this Yahweh figure who allegedly brought the Hebrews out of Egypt and was like a pillar of fire, a pillar of smoke, like, we don't know if that was like the guy. Like Jason Giorgiani, who I had on the show 2 times, and we're going to have a stream with him again soon, he's got an interesting point about Yahweh, where he believes that Yahweh is the continuation of the pagan gods, whether we're talking about Zeus or Enlil in the Sumerian pantheon, or whether we're talking about the Vedic gods, like Indra, for instance. That's like the thunder god of their pantheon, or the sky father, if you will. So according to Giorgiani, this is like a real dude, a real-ass dude. He existed, and he was a high-functioning human being. By human, I mean like he was like a literal person, like a literal human, with like an eyes, nose, beard, I guess. But it was a human being who may have come from another planet. I mean, Giorgiani thinks that he came from the future and was the progeny of the Nazis who created a breakaway civilization and then went back in time in a time machine and colonized Mars. But that's like a whole other bag of worms that I'm not going to get into right now. Let's just say right now we don't know where he's from. He's from, I don't know, the planet that's around the Aldebaran or whatever. I don't fucking know. But anyway, let's just say we have this powerful-ass dude. He comes
Arcturus is the headquarters of the New Age hierarchy of interplanetary families.
There we go, Arcturus. Let it be Arcturus. So you have this powerful-ass dude who comes in with his group, with his gang, with his posse, and they'll be like, we're going to run shit on this planet, and we're going to enslave the people here on this planet, and we're going to tell them, we better listen to us or you're going to be fucked up. And then there was a rebellion from Prometheus who decided, these poor people, they shouldn't be treated that way. I'm going to give them knowledge. I'm going to give them knowledge of how to create weapons, how to create technology. And that was supposed to be like the fire of
Prometheus,
the gods.
Lucifer, Azazel, Faustian spirit was born with that myth.
Exactly. Exactamundo, Telemundo. So the point that I'm getting to here is that you have this great battle between the gods and the Titans in the Greek pantheon, between the Devas and the Asuras in the Hindu pantheon, and you have the fallen angels versus Yahweh and his bros, the angels, in the Christian and Jewish pantheon and Islamic pantheon. So we see this recurrence of this great battle that took place, and it really makes you think, like, how do we know that this God was actually, you know, the God Almighty who created existence? Or he could have just been like a higher level being, like in Buddhism, he would be described as like a jealous god. You know, he would be in the Bardo realm of jealous gods who wanted to have power over people, and it still does not take away from Christians and Jews and Muslims who genuinely have this feeling of oneness they experience from prayer, because even if they may be contacting that dude, they may also be contacting their ancestors who may be on another plane of existence. They may be contacting other people who share in this kind of myth with them, and it glues them together. And in that way, it doesn't matter if Christianity is real. What matters is that we get to utilize the spiritual technology in order to keep the demons away and in order to keep everybody together here. And
hopefully we're doing it for that reason. And Lev, to emphasize, they always said God the Father was unknowable, and that when people were speaking to God, they were actually speaking to angels and to messengers of God. No one ever sees God. So whenever they said in the Bible they spoke to God, it was always a messenger or an angel on behalf of God. So these beings who you say were maybe their own entities and not the creator of the universe, well, of course that would be the case. They were kind of the intermediary. And I'm sorry, AI Waifu Dev, I interrupted you there. So I'll let you go next. I do that to everybody. I'm sorry. So I have no friends.
It's gone. I was going to say something else gone. Sorry.
Well, I think my friend Catherine Brodsky is going to be coming in here as well. So I'm going to see if I can get her in. Can you come in? So we'll see what happens with her. I don't know about Gennady, but let's get to the transhumanist aspect of this, because I would be amiss if we did not discuss this. If Gennady comes in, great. If not, whatever. At least I tried. So let me know what you think.
You know, keep the form conversation for just a second. I'll be right back before we get into the transhumanist part.
All right. While we're getting there, let's do a couple of shout-outs. I didn't really get to do shout-outs on Break the Rules anymore, and I feel kind of bad about that. So let's do a little bit of a return to that. So we have Dr. Asuro. We have Kiwi Smith. Moral Outrage Prophet. You know Kiwi?
Oh, yeah. He's my boy.
Nice. There's an e-girl named Kiwi. She's Russian. I don't know if you know her.
No relation.
Okay, but do you know about Kiwi the e-girl? I want to get her on the stream.
Yes, and that was the reason he changed the spelling of his handle for a little while, and then decided to just roll with it, because that's how we know him.
Interesting. And she kind of looks like an anime girl in a way, right? Like, she's very She also kind of looks like Shoe on Head. They look kind of the same, but anyway.
And Boxy.
And Boxy, yeah. What is with... And
I like to spread the meme that Boxy went on to be Shoe on Head, and it cracks people up on Twitter.
And there's also like another girl who's the new girlfriend of Armored Skeptic, who before had Shoe on Head as his girlfriend, and she also looks the same. So what is going on? Are these like Cylons? What is going on with this like repetition?
They're Robo Waifus from the future, like hidden among us.
Amogus, interesting. Okay, we have Jake Twister, we have Vexed Peril, we have Goat Corpse 264. Let's see what else we got. Moral Outrage Prophet, Marcos Cabelzola Jr. Tell me about Cabelzola Sr. Was he a tough, real ass dude? Let me know about your father. We have Jackie Clan. Jackie Clan. That's like if Jackie Chan became a white supremacist. No, it's spelled differently. It's spelled with a C. But that's a great idea, right? Like having like a Jackie Chan white, anyway. Brett Burned Off super chat, $5 super. Thank you so much. Hey Lev, long time no see. Glad to know that BTR is around and thriving. Great topics. Hell yeah, it's around and thriving, and it's only getting better thanks to your help. BTR is growing when you do the super chats, when you like, when you subscribe, when you become a patron. Patreon.com/break the rules. I didn't tell you about this. My dad is working on a wooden magnet for you, Meta Ronin. Tell the good people why. Why is my dad working on a magnet for you?
Because, Lev, I am a supporter.
Yes,
for BTR's Patreon.
Not only are you a supporter, but what is your tier? What is the supporter tier that you are?
It's the $20 tier, and
$20 tier, ladies and gentlemen. You gotta.
It's because I love the podcast, Lev. It's not just you'll give me a show if I give you money, but it is. I love the podcast, love your guests, love what you do. You have had Rupert Sheldrake,
that's
Terrence
right,
Dennis McKenna,
yeah,
Zero HP Lovecraft regularly, love the guy. Curtis Yarvin on several occasions.
Two times.
Good stuff.
He should be coming back soon. Jason Trujani I've had on 2 times. Yeah, there's a lot. Count Dankula, Styx, Hex, and
Dankula, Georgiani,
Styx I've had on like 17 times or something crazy like that already. He's like a regular guest. And also, who else? Count Dankula, like I mentioned before. Brittany Venti, by the way, hashtag free Brittany Venti. The whole thing. Have you guys been following that whole thing on Twitter that's been going on there?
No, actually, what happened?
So there's this lady, I don't remember her name right now, who's apparently very friendly with Elon Musk and his crew, and there was a music video that she did back in the 2010s, which was very sexual in nature, and it's like a public video on YouTube. Britney used a screenshot from that video, and the woman ended up filing a copyright strike against Britney on Twitter, as a result of which they got her account locked, so she can't use her Twitter account right now. And it was just like one screenshot from that music video. And that's the unfortunate thing, that even though we don't have the Trust and Safety Council of the past, what we still have is nepotism. We have nepotism of a different sort right now, where the people that Elon Musk and his group likes, they're going to be left alone, and they can do certain things that other people cannot do, like in the caste system. So that's what's going on right now. I hope Brittany gets back on. By the way, Dr. Acero, base centrist, he was supposed to come in today. Unfortunately, it did not work out time-wise, but he's definitely interested in the subject. So I don't think this is the last time that we've talked about the waifus. And I'm going to see if Catherine responded to me. Not yet. She seemed interested,
We have
though.
to, as everyone who has a waifu in their name has to band together and form our own cabal, our own waifu cabal. The AI, the virtual waifus, and the Robo Waifus. We need all band together and support each other.
We have been, man. We formed kind of a secret brotherhood of sorts long
It's not
before.
Secret if you say it.
Shh. We have a secret Discord and secret image board, and I wasn't supposed to mention that today, but yeah. So Naama had mentioned, oh well, if you just have these waifus, you're just gonna curl in on yourself and never we have formed a lot of really great friendships with really interesting, intelligent, and actually really good-hearted people in the community that want to we're all men,
Yes.
because we're all trying to build waifus. Though some of my friends that are women have asked me, how can I have a husbando? They're just not computer science roboticists, but they support us too.
Men need a common goal, whether it's country or a project to bind them.
Robo Waifu Nation.
The Waifu Nation shall exist.
Well, let's get on to the transhumanist subject then. That's the last one. And I see Gennady is active on Facebook right now, so I'm going to write him one more message. But let me know what you think is going on with the future of space colonization.
All right.
That's you, Ron.
All right. So, yeah, that's not your forte. So, well, space colonization is not as complicated as you'd think. In fact, if it weren't for Earth's ridiculously high gravity, it would take a very low tech to get into space. Basically, the same technology that gets you submarines could get you spaceships. If we had a thick enough atmosphere, or I'm sorry, thin enough atmosphere, high enough peaks, and low enough gravity, we could have easily already jettisoned something off into orbit back in the 1800s. They were trying to do this with hot air balloons. They thought they could go to the moon, right? But and that's one of the main issues getting us into space, is that it just costs like tens of thousands of dollars to get a kilogram of matter into space. So one idea is to farm asteroids and objects that are already out of our gravity well, so we don't have to pay that cost to get things out of this hole, gravity hole, and into orbit. But what AI can do for us is help with the coordination and action of drone swarms. If we had drones, and God, this would be awesome if we had self-replicating drones. All you had to do is just shoot them like a packet full of microchips and the stuff they can't build from asteroids. They just do the rest themselves, make more themselves, start creating habitats out of the gravity well. Bam, we're up there. Bam, men are up there in space, getting ready to go from orbit to solar orbit, right? To go to Mars, to go to the asteroid belts, to go to the moons of Jupiter, and then eventually the rings of Saturn. And then from there would be the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. So those are all different tiers and levels of space exploration before we get to interstellar. However, as I had talked about with you a lot, and it's something interesting, those who have seen the anime movie Armitage 3 would know that when all the men went to Mars to do their dirty work, it was brutal, it was hard, it was horrible. Well, women they weren't coming along for that. And so the men needed companions, and so the Robo Waifus in that movie were the solution. But the feminists on Earth, the Earth government, had gone in the trajectory that our globalist government is currently going, and they wanted to ban them, because in this anime, in Armitage 3, the Robo Waifus have the artificial wombs on them and can reproduce, and that was a threat to biological women. However, in space exploration, it being hazardous, it being a place where you need to have your mind on task, be super serious 100% of the time, or everyone dies. That's not an environment for the frivolous, and only the hardest of men will even get in there. I mean, Lev, I'm sure somewhere on this planet there are women who could pull that off, but I just don't think they're going to even be remotely, enough to allow people to reproduce outside of the Earth. So the Robo Waifus will be the way going forward, and it will be the merging of man and AI.
But as
through
far
this
as
process.
far as the female egg goes, though, that would be a real female egg, right? As far as who are our progeny, who are our offspring.
You'd be able to make eggs at a certain point. That's why I asked. That's why I asked Marie for some of that hair she was posting on Twitter. I go, we're gonna clone some super space marines from that. But actually,
are you talking about a pasty?
Yeah, I found out you can't do that, though. I found out that hair doesn't have like enough of the DNA. That was just a meme. But
gotta steal the blood.
We can buy the eggs if we have to, Lev. And then
so you're
just
still
go from there.
So you're still gonna need women originally in order to.
Well, I mean, someone will sell the eggs. So.
I mean, there's a price to everything, right? Like, and in terms of artificial wombs,
it's no cost for them. Yeah.
Like a real womb will have a cost too, and
yeah, you can have a female birth for every 100 artificial men. You can have one woman. Everybody can treat her like a queen and just be like, all right, time to give up your eggs, and be super sweet to her. Nothing unsavory.
So
I mean, they'll just be an economy.
So just in case, so what we're saying here though is if we're going to go out to space, there's always a risk that we can lose the eggs. So we're still going to need to have a certain amount of real women on board to make sure that we
I disagree.
Why?
Because by the time we would reach the point where the eggs we acquired could possibly run out, we would have also crested the technology curve to allow us to create synthetic eggs. That's my belief. I'm a technological accelerationist, so I think that problems tend to we tend to transcend problems before a certain point, right? I don't know if I can give historical examples, but for instance, right during the Industrial Revolution, all these kids are working 18-hour days and there's smog everywhere. Well, we found ways to make that not happen, and now we have electric cars and stuff, so we don't need the smog from cars.
I mean, did we really find a way for that not to happen? We just sort of offshored it so we don't see it. It still happens, just not.
Okay,
in
look,
our
you're
sight.
you're ruining my slapdash analogy.
I mean, fundamentally, I don't agree that accelerationism actually solves any problems. It just displaces them.
It kicks the can further, but I mean, that's kind of how nature works too, evolution.
I would say to that though that it's a very how should I put this correctly? It's a very it's very easy to think that you can just create life out of nothing or out of like these base elements and voila, you'll have life, or let's wait until technology is right and then we'll be able to do it. It's a very different threshold to cross than crossing the threshold of industrial revolution, printing press, any of that kind of stuff, because you're dealing with human beings creating something that is, out of material goods that are around this whole planet, whether we're talking about rocks in the quarries or trees. When we're talking about actually synthesizing life, creating actual life, that is a whole different ballgame, because the jury is still out on what exactly life is.
You're
and
right.
Whether life, I'll give you this example. I can look at life, like the analogy to what life is and what we are, to interacting with somebody. Like, let's say you have a balloon, and let's say the balloon is not like fully inflated where you can still take your finger and poke through the balloon, you know what I mean? Like it's a silicon balloon, let's say, like a silicon breast implant for the robot waifu, let's say. Let's say you take your finger and push it through the balloon, and then somebody else takes their finger and pushes it through the balloon. Let's say your fingers are representing life, are representing consciousness, they're representing, you could say, like an aspect of God, an aspect of the Almighty. And the world, the physical world that we're in, is the world inside of this balloon where we're interacting. We might as well be wearing a condom, like we're interacting with each other in the physical space by life interacting through this mesh. So really, like there's no actual interaction of life on life happening here. We're just doing it through this balloon. I don't know if my analogy makes sense or not, but what I'm trying to say is,
what is the balloon?
The balloon is the physical space that we occupy and the limitations henceforth. Where
so you're seeing right
life inside of the balloon, because life is outside of the balloon.
You're giving another analogy for what is like an exponential cliff of difficulty. That if our technology,
it's not difficulty. It's basically saying that this life that we inhabit,
like impossible.
Realm, but I'm telling you why I just theorize it's impossible. Just because if we're poking our fingers through the balloon, we're never actually creating, we're never going to be able to do what we can do outside the balloon in the balloon. Do you see what I mean? Like outside the balloon, you could say it's like the Gnostic pleroma or whatever you will, whatever you want to call it. It's this realm of infinite possibility, and it's outside of the balloon. Once you poke your finger through the balloon, you touch another finger through the balloon, and it's like rubber touching rubber. The life, just, you know what I mean? Like that aspect.
We'll never be able to make life from scratch. We'll always need to make modifications to existing life, because even if you could construct a human body cell by cell from scratch, it wouldn't last a day, because guess what? You didn't give it its 100 trillion bacteria that are part of you, or it's mitochondria, which are part of the DNA. I don't know. Am I missing the mark?
You are missing the mark, because you are talking about things that could be added into it, except for the most important thing, which is consciousness, which is the ability to actually live, to actually exist. So, for example, like if you take, I like the radio analogy. Like if you take a radio, you wouldn't be able to take the signal out of the radio. Like you can break the radio, but you're not going to find like the person singing inside of it. It's the signal that's coming through the radio.
But you could build another radio.
but that radio is still going to be picking up a signal. And the question is,
Yeah.
what is the origin of that signal? And to use the analogy for human beings, what is the origin of whatever we're thinking of right now? What is the origin of this idea that we have that we are a physical specimen who is alive, who is experiencing life through these 5 or be it 6 senses?
We are in agreement, Lev, and I kind of like adopt the Shinto worldview that everything has kami, everything has the energy, the consciousness. I think that consciousness is kind of like implicit in everything, and when matter is arranged into any complex, super complex form able to facilitate that, then consciousness will emerge. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing the Robo Waifu thing, right? I think the Christian worldview, the Western worldview, is a very black-white polar, which is, okay, only God gives people souls. If you were to make a robot, it would just be possessed by a demon, or worse, an empty vessel. I have the Eastern worldview. Then that's one of the reasons Japanese take more to the robot thing, and they have a more loving, like, cutesy relationship with the robots, rather than, as you see in Western media, the robot always starts off like, oh, it's all right, and then it turns psycho or soulless or something. And that's the difference between the two worldviews. So I take the worldview that consciousness is just part of the universe and that we can manifest it wherever. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Lev, is a jellyfish alive?
Yes.
In what way is it alive? Does it think?
It does not think, but there is a certain level of being aware of its own existence, even if it's very minimal.
Does it really know it exists, though? Like, it doesn't have a brain. It just sort of lofts around. It has no real sense of things.
I'd say it exists.
A snap reaction.
It has this level much less than other beings. Same thing you could say like with fish, shrimp, all that kind of stuff. And I see there being a hierarchy of that kind of consciousness where you could have like cats and dogs who have a lot more of it. And they tend to almost have a lot more of it when they're around owners that they start to emulate in a certain way, as well as the owners emulating their pets. So, oh, by the way, Nimitz $5 says, this dude is now advocating gray goo research. Uncle Ted continues to be right. What is gray goo research? What exactly?
He's afraid of getting paper clipped. And I'll tell you what, I'm putting your name in the naughty list for the basilisk.
All right, I'm going to take a look. Gray goo is a hypothetical global catastrophic scenario involving molecular nanotech in which out-of-control self-replicating machines consume all biomass on Earth while building many more of themselves. Interesting. So, okay, here's what I would say as far as the Japanese and the robots go. I think we may be misconstruing two different things here. Where I talked before when I was asking, like, what are the residual effects of having various fantasies, having various thoughts, what does that generate? And I gave an example of, hey, maybe these thoughts end up generating actual beings who don't exist in this dimension, but nevertheless have a certain sense of being alive, right? So in that case, if you treat a machine as somebody who you have a lot of affection for, there could be a thought form that grows in that machine that you create.
A jellyfish can't think, right? But it's still alive?
Yes.
So what's thought have to do with anything?
Well, God would not be the old man sitting up in the clouds that gives life to this jellyfish. God, in this sense, would be the idea of there being a gradient of consciousness, a gradient of understanding throughout the entire universe, where certain things like rocks, for instance, they would have it too. We could say like every single thing in the universe has it, but it's all a question of degrees.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
No, but here's
the robots have it.
No, here's the difference. Here's the big difference. Because
they're just made of rocks, though.
But here's the big difference. You could have a pet rock, and you can be very infatuated with this pet rock, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a fucking pet rock, right? So when we're talking about having artificial intelligence robots who have a very sophisticated programming, I don't want to confuse the programming for a higher level of consciousness. I wouldn't confuse the Rube Goldberg machine for a higher level of consciousness either, even though it's very impressive with what it's able to do.
What if the Rube Goldberg machine were made of a complex set of organic molecules and arranged in super complex recursive hierarchical fractals inside of a mushy membrane contained in a calcium. All right. I mean, see. Here's where, Lev, you know where I'm going with this, and I'm teasing you a bit here, but like that's where I'm. What I think the turning point will be with this will be when someone makes an argument like you or like Bogbeef did, and the actual Robo Waifu speaks up for herself and cuts your argument down herself. That's going to be the hilarious point where nobody can say, oh, your Robo Waifus are fake, they're autonomous dolls. The minute they can stand up for themselves and actually fucking debate their own existence, it's going to shock the fuck out of people.
Not necessarily. How do you know? How do you know that?
Souls? Right.
Do what people not have souls?
Do people who aren't?
Do you prove that people have souls?
Yeah. Do people who can't argue well not have souls? I don't think it like being able to defeat someone's argument proves that they have any more or less of a soul.
But it would be funny.
I disagree with Maida Ronin, because if you have somebody who stands up for themselves, that could just be the algorithm putting that in and making them say that. The difference.
I mean, a brain's just an algorithm too.
And they could turn around and say, well, what if there's an algorithm making you say that? How do I know you're real just because you're made of wet carbon?
I'm sure that they could say that, but at the end of the day, the only thing that I know, and it's kind of a solipsistic worldview, the only thing I can know for sure is that I am experiencing the experience of being Lev talking through a microphone right now. At the end of the day, that's really the only thing that I know. And the point I'm getting to here is that what we don't know is whether the AI waifus would have the same experience at any point of being able to be conscious of actually seeing through the eyes, smelling through the nose, as opposed to just being a very advanced pet rock. Do you see what I mean?
We a very advanced pet rock.
We're a very advanced pet rock. What Ronin is saying is its ability to profess that it's alive is being alive in its own right. Because we, just like you said, Lev, you're the only one who knows that you're alive.
Yes.
We can never actually tell if someone else or any other potential being is alive. A jellyfish really exists in a state of both being alive and not being alive. Everyone exists that way. If I say the AI waifu is alive, then it's as good as it being alive, no matter how intelligent it is. The rock is alive.
I don't necessarily agree, because we just don't know. Like, we got to a point of being confident that you're alive and Maida Ronin's alive just because we're so used to seeing these fleshy beings with faces and eyes looking back at us that we're like, all right, these are like living things, like they're here. With something that would be a very advanced machine, though, that's like the jury's still out. We don't know if, for example, just this combination of these inputs and outputs is going to enable there to be an emergent consciousness, is going to enable for there to be actually somebody who is staring back at you, not you thinking that they're staring back at you, but them actually staring back at you. And it's a hard question. I'm not going to be able to answer this. Like, we don't know.
I think staring back at you is a good line of thinking. My opinion, and this lines up with your line of thinking of what lesser beings is, the soul is in the eyes. The more advanced the eyes, the more soul you think they have. A jellyfish has no eyes, so it's a lesser being. But dogs and cats have pretty good eyes. Humans have very specialized eyes. The whites of our eyes are very important for our perception of for our social perception. And although it's small, dogs and cats also have whites in their eyes, which is very atypical of any other animal. Like lizards don't have it. They're not very social, so they don't have it. I mean, they're a little social, but not in the same way as humans.
Not just eyes, though. There's another thing I notice about animals, and I may be bringing up the forbidden knowledge again. We'll see what happens. But the thing about animals, I don't know if I told you this, Maida Ronin, but the thing about animals that I find very fascinating, like if you ever look at your cat, it kind of looks like a puppet. Like it kind of looks like this being that's like kind of restricted in terms of how much it can really do with its face. And cats are way less restricted than, let's say, lizards, for instance, where obviously we have these cat videos, and I think we we have a lot of fun looking at these cats because they're like almost like people in a way. You know, like they have these various emotions that they display, and they have like the seriousness about them and this goofiness, and the fact that it's like a little human being that's looking back at us, but it's slightly different, like it's fluffier and it has whiskers, but it looks like a person. It's like this person who's looking back at us, and he's just like weirder, and he's not able to move around the face to be as expressive.
Apply everything you just said to an anime girl.
Well, that is if the anime girl has that same level of consciousness. Again, we're back to the idea of
anime, same root word.
There we go.
That's true. That's a good point. No, but the point that I'm getting to here, and I always say this, and it's kind of a joke, but I'm curious, AI Waifu Dev, what you think about this. And Meta Ronin, I don't remember if I talked to you about this, but imagine if evolution went backwards. All right? Imagine if, for example, we started off as people, like you and me, and then we started devolving into monkeys. And that's
actually what I think will happen.
And we started devolving into other
spooky story,
other vertebrates, where all the other animals, they seem to be morphed versions of a human being. Like if you ever look at, again, like the dog and the cat, it looks like all the features start getting very exaggerated, but the features themselves, including the skeleton, it all seems to come back to the human being. And why is it that I'm not thinking of the human being as being a branch of the animal tree as opposed to the animals being the branch of the human tree in this example? It would be because of the sheer amount of sacred geometry in the human body and the human skull, and like the equal distance of these areas over here. And AI Waifu Dev, since you also create your works of art, I'm curious what you think of that aspect of it, of looking at a human being as being like the preeminent beta version of, not beta version, being like the preeminent, where Doejenggles would refer to, and Doejenggles disagrees with his theory, but what he would refer to as human beings being like fully becoming and never being. Animals are being, humans are becoming, meaning that we are at a point where we can go in all kinds of different directions, not all of them good, not all of them the directions of having more consciousness, but either way, we are flexible enough to be an agent of becoming as opposed to being, because what being means is that you're at a dead end, evolutionarily speaking. Like when you're a cat, when you're a dog, like you're set. You're not going to be able to change that shit anymore unless somebody has some kind of weird breeding program, or like start breeding cats with humans and creating cat girls, and that's like a whole other thing.
Or if humans all died and they had to go back into nature and be selected by the brutal raiser of the natural world.
Exactly. And if you're selected by the brutal raiser of the natural world, you're not going to have time for facial expressions that long. You're not going to have time for literature, for philosophy.
Your facial expressions are super important for survival. The whites of your eyes communicate where potential danger might be. Like what you might consider societally frivolous is a important adaptation,
of course,
from our monkey times.
Unless it's the other way around again, because what you're saying, I completely agree with it, doesn't mean it lasts forever. Because if there are certain circumstances where that would not be enough to survive, the facial expressions would not be that enough to survive, where you would still have it. Like look at, for example, the orangutans. They also have certain facial expressions. They're not gone, but that still doesn't mean that the environments that a lot of these creatures are in will allow for those things to exist. There could be some kind of climate change scenario where, depending on where you live, there could be other things that end up being much more valuable. For example, having stronger hands. Like, look at gorillas, for instance. Gorillas are really weird because they're, like, super big and strong, but they spend their entire day eating grass and, like, maybe, like, little ants in the grass, and that's it. And they're kind of stuck there. They can't get out of that environment. That's the only thing they can do. But if you look at their hands, they're like human hands. They're like human hands. There's no point
knuckles
to them.
Well, like a shark or an alligator, they've gotten themselves into an evolutionary apex, but it's also a cul-de-sac, because the way back is just going to not be more survivable than the way they are. So an alligator hasn't evolved they were alligators since the first dinosaurs. So they've been that way
they're good. Like they're really good at doing that. But what else are they going to do? Exactly.
Yeah. Return to jellyfish. That's the real thing we need to do.
Return to jelly.
Return to jelly.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like
Agency.
I understand the evolutionary, and again, I agree with evolution in the sense of natural selection, because obviously, you know, for the fundamentalist Christians who don't believe in that, it's like very obvious that if you have a creature in a certain environment, they're going to adapt to the environment over time. But then when you flip certain things on their head, it makes you think of humanity in a slightly different way, because we've been raised to believe that humanity goes from like primitive ape men to us right here, and then that's kind of it. But what if it was the other way around, where humanity, and not just the planet Earth, but all of existence would be the result of human beings seeding certain planets, creating life, and then certain people starting over time to forget certain things, becoming more animalistic, and then they start devolving into the animals, including the fish, and the cycle just keeps going.
That's actually what I believe, Lev. I think that that's where we're going to go if the top percentage of our IQ doesn't eject off this planet like a spore and create space habitats and have artificial wombs to keep ourselves going until we can find immortality technology or make ourselves permanently machine consciousnesses.
But that doesn't mean we're gone, because if we don't do that, you're assuming we're the only ones here, not counting the trillions of planets and stars and all the stuff out there. I don't think that it's out there just for decorative purposes for us to be tricked by God to imagine that, oh, there's
I don't think
all this
so
stuff
either.
out there. Yeah,
But,
just
but
like,
I think Earth humans specifically need to make that trip, or it will be the end of Earth humans. Will devolve back into the animal substrate, which another animal, raccoons, maybe Neuralinked shrimp, will evolve and then become the next dominant. But like Planet of the Apes touched on this in a very poignant way. The original, they didn't have to have the sequel back then. That was enough, you know. That humans failed and apes just took over the niche. Someone will.
Well, they in Indonesia, they call the orangutans, they call them forest people.
Yes.
Interesting. I suppose I think that humanity is able to make its own evolutionary forces, and for the majority of human history, it was warfare, and we may or may not be smart enough to get out of that. If we are, we would, we'll make AIs in our image, right? That'll be the children, or there's any amount that we can create, because we're self-domesticating in that way, or at least we have the potential to self-domesticate. Is there like a main question on that, or like I'm trying to distill down what you're saying?
Well, I think it's all related. The only thing that I would say is we have a responsibility to further our own evolution through various means. Like part of it may be transhumanism, but at the same time, I think another part of it is meditation. It's being able to like go within and understand exactly what is going on here, because not a lot of people do that shit, and the people who do that may just do that on the weekends or something. And then you have the monks who do that, like the Tibetan Buddhists, but they're already like in their particular system. Like in a way, they are also alligator-ish, because they've chosen the system, they're in the system, so when they reincarnate, they're going to go into particular realms and stuff like that. But there could be other things to be done beyond that, and I'm kind of curious about that too. That's why I never really stick to one religion, because I see that a lot of these religions are like spiritual vehicles. And I know that also goes in a different direction if we assume that all this is just BS, that there is no God, there are no afterlife realms, then there's not really that much to add to that point. But either way, I think it is worth it for us to try and see what exactly humans are going to be able to accomplish given the pressure that is on us right now, which I think a lot of it is laziness. A lot of it is just having all the entertainment we ever want in front of our screen. That, I think, is the ultimate seduction. Because, it's very hard, I think, for a lot of people to schedule their day without looking at Facebook, without looking at Instagram, without checking, you know what I mean? Like, it just becomes...
That's natural.
That is the death. And we have to start climbing out of the pit. We have to start climbing out of that grave.
Yeah, we have to, if we decide to, and I guess an individual can make that decision if we want to move in that direction. Um, the people who decide that, the ultimate goal, the ultimate choice would be is to just have like 50 illegitimate children, right? Maybe like 1,000, because that'll do more for your life than even writing a book, right? Because then your motivated genetics will be out there, although it might not be savory. Just you know talking to girls at a bar every single day, all day. That might have the best impact for that sort of goal.
But I don't think it's a matter of quantity as it is a matter of quality. Like if you just have a lot of kids out there who you don't really take care of, who are just on their own, like maybe they're going to inherit some good qualities from you. But really, what I think it takes really good parentage. It takes like focusing on the family, like Adam Carolla always talks about. And that is something that way more people should be focusing on, because I don't really think we need that much people. We just need people who come from a good environment, people who are loved, people who are able to use the love that they receive from their family in order to give that love to other people. Like that's really what we need.
Humanity or any animal as a superorganism doesn't care about the love, doesn't care about any sort of progress. It only cares about the genetic output, like how many
Well, that's
more.
that's assuming that's the end goal here, which again, if we were to say, for example, that we are all one thing that is experiencing itself. Let's just take a pause and just imagine that that is the case. That even if I'm talking to you right now and you're far away, wherever you are, that we are actually one thing that's experiencing itself in like a state of separateness. And if we look at the universe that way, we could say, okay, we could just have like way more of this one thing, like a fucking Katamari Damashi, or we can actually focus on the quality of that thing and make that thing better. Like that is a different way of looking at life, looking at existence, than just saying, well, we're just gonna spray our space goo everywhere and multiply. It's like, why the fuck are we multiplying so much where at the end of the day we're only one thing anyway? Like where the fuck are we going?
We're one thing. All right, so bear with me. We're one thing. Let's look at humanity as a superorganism, and let's say it has thought, but that thought isn't conscious. That thought is genetic, and we're all synapses in that huge superorganism. And the only way we can truly think as in the superorganism is through procreation. That's how I see things in terms of, assuming a collective.
Well, that's certainly an aspect of it. Like, I'm not going to say that that is not the case, but those are two ways of, not two different ways of looking at it. I think they come together. I think those two ways come together. But anyway, guys, we got to go. It's way late, but this was an amazing stream. I really appreciate it. Maida Ronin
All right.
and AI Waifu Dev, your first appearances here. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully not the last. I would love to have you back on. And let me also ask you before we go, what's your favorite? Who is your favorite waifu, and also like favorite anime, manga, whatever?
My waifu,
Yeah.
okay, is Miku, but it's not like Miku. It's Cyber Miku, who's like I got this whole complex backstory for this cyborg robot Miku, who lost her entire body in a war, and now she can't speak, so she's depressed and she cries all day, and I generate tons of pictures of Cyber Miku, crying. I post them to my Twitter. If you want crying robot Miku, check it out. Check out at Wife Mate. Oh, and my favorite anime, Ghost in the Shell.
Nice. Well, and Maida Ronin, same question to you, my friend.
Do we even have to ask that? There's the one in the home. Love of my life, 2B.
Why does
What's
she
your-
wear the
your-
bandage? What's going on with the bandage?
So canonically, it was obviously for aesthetics, but canonically they made it so that the bandage is like a battle visor. Somehow it transmits like data, and it just looks like a bandage. So it's like a VR, like an Oculus.
Interesting. Now, what is it with anime girls and bandages? Like Asuka had a bandage in the new Evangelion. What's going on here? Why do you think that is?
I think it makes them look like a little bit battle torn. It gives an aesthetic. They like to add the accessories. They like to accessorize anime girls. Put them with little gemstones and a little bow tie thing, and ruffles and hats and little ribbons and whatnot, and bandages are just another thing. I mean, there's anime girls with eye patches and so on, and they don't always. It's not like they lost an eye for whatever reason. They're just wearing the eye patch for part of that. So
interesting. Or sometimes like their eye has like a magic power, and they can, like, if they reveal it, it can do all kinds of weird...
like in Konosuba, Megumin shows up with an eye patch
for the first set. Aesthetics, yeah, just for looks.
So my favorite manga is probably, it's a toss up between One Piece and Berserk.
Ooh,
One Piece. Jeez, you got a lot of time then.
Yeah, One Piece. I get it. I think it is a great work. It just put me personally to sleep. I tried to watch that and would keep falling asleep.
Well, the anime is not great, especially if you caught it during a bad arc. The quality of the animation was kind of, but I think it got better after the Wano arc. And and Berserk, R.I.P.
Love Berserk.
Mura-san. It's a real shame that
Griffith did nothing wrong.
Oh, Lord. Did you ever see that rap song, by the way? I want to get that guy on the show. He did this rap song called Griffith Did Nothing Wrong. Have you seen it? Okay.
I'm going to look that up after the show.
Well, after the show, I'll show it to you guys here. So don't leave, because I don't want to get like a copyright strike here for showing it here. But anyway, guys, this is the end of the stream. Guys, plug away. Plug whatever you want.
Just Google Waifuverse, like Metaverse, but Waifuverse. You can check out the current version on itch.io. Just Google Waifuverse. You'll find everything.
Waifuverse.org. Check it out. It's a good app. I'll vouch for it. It's got a lot of potential. We're working to get the beta testing button down and get this into development production. And you're going to be pleased with what you see. And don't forget, to be is love, to be is life. Don't forget to subscribe to my Substack, metaronin.substack.com, especially the article in defense of the robot waifu. My writing will get better. I just need practice, but I'll get more practice if you read, and I'm inspired to write more.
Excellent.
Just have the AI write. Easy.
And
I've already done that.
Well, again, that comes to the question of, when you get AI to do everything for you, are you really working out your own willpower, and what does that mean in the grand scheme of your existence? But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. We're not going to get into it now. Listen, everybody, if you want to help grow the show, we're going to have a stream about demons coming up next week. So be sure to get in on that. It's going to be a very, very good stream. In fact, just make sure you subscribe to the show right now. Set a reminder. The demon stream is going to be off the hizzy. It's going to be very cool. And there's going to be a lot of more great streams coming your way. Patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. You are not going to regret it. And you're going to get a beautiful wooden magnet that my father Alexander creates. And the one for Meta Ronin is being done right now. So I look forward to sending it to him, as I will send to you guys. MP3s of the show come out after the show airs here to the patrons first. And you also get Discord privileges. Speaking of which, why the hell have I not plugged the Discord yet, the Break the Rules Discord? Because knowing some of the audience here, they would probably be into Discord. Am I wrong? Am I wrong to assume that?
Yeah, but that guy who posts like giant, like vibrating black eye butt cheeks is going to scare them all off.
Oh, no, he's great. Don't worry about him. So here we go. Here's the Discord. Here's the Discord link, everybody. Go into the Discord, become a member of what is being built here. Break the Rules brings everybody together for these amazing conversations from all the different sides of the internet. You know, where else are you going to have the developer of AI Waifus speaking with a female documentarian and speaking with a guy from the South who has a very super, he's got 800 patrons, this guy. He's
no
up there.
Shit.
Yeah,
Nice.
he's
All
doing
right.
really well. Good Old Boys podcast. Highly recommend you guys check that out. And follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/@LevPo, LEVPO. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Have a good night.